OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
It is 7:30. You're welcome along to OTB AM. We're with you all the way through until 10 o'clock as ever, Monday to Friday. We'll have reaction to another mental weekend of sport over the course of the next couple of hours. We've got the Six Nations, the FA Cup, the Premier League, the National Leagues, the Formula One. A lot of exciting stuff happening across all of those, and whatever caught your eye, we'd love to hear about this morning. You can tweet us at Off The Ball or comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us. Tommy Rooney is beaming in live from lovely Clare this morning. How are you getting on, Tommy?
Owen, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. A busy weekend. You were at the big one yesterday.
Oh, yes. I spent my afternoon at Meath and Clare and Ennis.
What's Cusack Park like on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the National League? It's like one of the most underrated grounds, I dare say.
Yeah, well, I hadn't realised that James O'Donoghue had picked it as his favourite ground to play with. Now, speaking to a couple of Clare people, when an opposition player picks your ground as their favourite ground, it's never a great sign.
No.
Yeah, it's not. Surprisingly, I was the only one in the stadium yesterday wearing a half and half jersey, half Meath strip on one side, half Clare on the other. A lot of people now. I don't know what you're like when you're at a National League game. I can imagine the excitement in Mayo or Armagh and Kerry yesterday had kept your attention throughout. But I'd be one for checking scores in the other games as the game was going on. Now, a lot of people yesterday in Cusack Park were listening to the hurling. Clare and Galway were on at the same time. And it just kind of struck me that, I know it must be difficult to schedule it, but for, Clare football to capture the attention, it's next to impossible when the hurlers are in action to Galway at the same time. Now, while the result of yesterday's game, the way results have fallen in Division 2, I don't think it's that big a deal for either or. It went down to the wire. Wasn't the greatest game of football, to be honest with you. They both kind of cancelled each other out a little bit. It ended up being 10-9 in the end. A lot of drama at the end, but you could hear the radios playing in the background throughout yesterday in Cusack Park, listening to the hurling.
Meath won is the big story here. They got the job done. They're safe. They're going to be staying up. That's the trajectory here. I would offer that if there are people in the football stadium checking the hurling scores, then it's a good sign for football. They could have just gone to the hurling game instead. No,
100%. Well, like in Clare, the people of West Clare are massively into football, so a huge cohort of the support there would have been from one side of the county. But yeah, I think that's a pretty natural thing. Like I can't help myself. I'm always checking the score bureau after in the game, trying to get a read on who's playing. What was the excitement like after you had travelled up? I know you had travelled from Dublin as part of the Kerry Mafia, but had a lot of Kerry people travelled up from Tralee and Killarney and Dingle and other parts of the county up to the athletic grounds? Like, was there a big Kerry support?
There was, yeah. There was a good crowd around. I think someone said it was 11,000 people at the athletic grounds yesterday. I've never been to the athletic grounds. It's great location, not too dissimilar to Cusack Park insofar as that you've got that kind of covered terrace which just creates this wall of sound on one side of the park. And I think that if there's one thing that gets people more excited than a little bit of needle in the game, then I haven't found it, especially in the National League when maybe the stakes aren't that high. I think that sometimes the stakes in the National League are at its highest when you've got two relegation-threatened teams, especially in Division 1, going head-to-head, whereas maybe the actual incentive to win yesterday wasn't as great as it might have been in some of the other games, for example. But what really turns the temperature up is when there is that little bit of needle, when you have, I don't know, some fella on the back of another fella, or a cynical pull down, or I said it to the people around me at the time. I was like, there was a chance here of a brawl in a tunnel at halftime. It was just ratcheting up nicely right before halftime, and sure enough, just as they were going into the tunnel at halftime, there was a bit of pushing and shoving, and I think Mike Quirk said to his players, listen, you hang here, you go into the tunnel first, Armagh, and let's just forget this nonsense and get this over and done with. And it didn't escalate into anything more, but that sort of setting down a marker, not being pushed around, that nature to Gaelic games definitely does not exist when it comes to the National League, and that was definitely there yesterday. And
what about in the stadium? Was there any jostling going on between fans?
No.
Was there any needle? I know you've had your issues before being below in Castlebar and Mayo at league games where a bit of needle might set in. None of that?
No idea what sort of issues you'd be talking about on that front, but no, absolutely not. They were lovely people yesterday, Armagh, because they were on the losing side. I'm sure I'd be sitting here this morning saying that they're horrible fans had they been celebrating a win, because that would be a disgraceful thing to do as a fan, to be happy after watching your team winning a game. So no, they were good yesterday. Hospitable.
Come here. There was a lot of chatter yesterday, online especially, about David Clifford embracing superstardom. Now, maybe a lot of chatter means that I tweeted something like that he's somebody who, like, he celebrates his goals. And there's a couple of people putting out excerpts from David Byrne, who wrote Game of My Life, the Kerry book, put out excerpts up from it. Like, and I'll get the Kieran Donaghy quote here in a second. But what was the excitement like in the stadium when you heard that David Clifford is in the 26? Because, Sean O'Shea's missing with a toe injury. It looked like the Kerry team that was released on Friday night were missing a couple of key players. Paddy Clifford was out. Jack Savage and Tony Brosnan were starting once more. They played really well in Tralee against Mayo, the two of them. But when Clifford is named, number 10 on his back, but he's brought into the 26 at the last minute, is there an excitement? Is there a bit of, ooh, great,
yeah,
it's going to be worth the trip?
Definitely interesting. The celebration thing is a good talking point. You mentioned the David Byrne extract there from his book. Does David Clifford need to get a better celebration, though? I mean, the arms outstretched. Like when he did it first, I was like, right, is he actually going around to just make sure that he's making himself as big as possible for the resulting kick out, or is this actually the celebration? Because
kind of Cantona-esque.
Yeah, it kind of was. I hadn't really kind of seen it before. It was quite conspicuous yesterday. It was like, oh, that is an actual reaction to that goal, and he's kind of certainly dragging this out in terms of a celebration. So I wonder, is he going to do a Luke Ayling next week and try and replicate Robbie Keane or something like that?
Yeah, do you know what? He's going to be scoring goals, so he's going to have to think about it. Will I read out the Kieran Donaghy quote from that?
Yeah, go for it.
In my life. So Donaghy's talking about how, especially down in Limerick, down in 2014 in the semi-final, that the crowd made such a massive difference in that game, that you could just feel it. Even when the game was swinging away from them, the crowd would pull you back into it, and how he always played off the crowd. And you could see that when Kieran Donaghy played football. He said he would have struggled to play during the pandemic, given the fact that there was no crowds out there. But he said that he pulled David Clifford aside when he first came into the scene and said, Dave, celebrate your goals, because you're going to be an icon for the next number of years. If you get that big goal and you celebrate with the crowd, they will give you more energy and give everyone a lift. And like that is absolutely a factor, because when Clifford scores, there's a collective roar from the Kerry people, because they know there's an anticipation when he receives the ball in his hands that he's going to do something special. And there's a bit like, with most other players, there's an element of chance that he may miss. And even if Clifford does miss, everyone knows it's a freak and he's going to end up scoring 1-4, 1-5, 8 points anyways.
Yeah.
It just has to give that extra bit of buzz when you've got a marquee player like that.
And obviously the kind of key point there being that he was up against Kieran Donaghy coach team yesterday. Donaghy, by the way, very involved in the warm-up, I must say, took the warm-up himself, a lot of simple hand passing drills, and the game was delayed by 10 minutes. I'm not quite sure why that was, because we were there. It was like everybody's in the stadium, nobody's coming in. I'm not sure, are we sure that wasn't to do with the GPA standoff? That there was a situation of pushing the game back? Wasn't there some suggestion last week that there could have been an attempt to disrupt some broadcast? That wasn't the suggestion. The suggestion was that there was people coming in late, but certainly everybody was in come 2 o'clock yesterday, and they still waited till 2:10. So it was an extra long warm up basically for Armagh. And Donaghy was right down in front of us doing it. But no,
when did the Mafia get word that Clifford was in?
Like we were speaking to his dad beforehand, and you kind of got to. He said he didn't know. He said he didn't know what the crack was, but there was definitely a sense that there was a chance that he had travelled all right, which was a bit different. But no, I mean, I think that's interesting what you're saying there about the celebration. Because he was in Ulster as well yesterday, I would say Ulster are the kings of the goal celebration. Whether it's Joe Brolly blowing kisses to the crowd, or still my favourite celebration in GAA is when Ronan O'Neill dabbed after scoring a goal in Croke Park that one time, which I think is the next level. I think David Clifford needs to dab next time he scores a goal, and then all of a sudden we're away with this thing. And I think we should embrace this. I think no quick kickouts. Let the referee encourage players to go celebrate, and then get the kickouts underway, and let's create a brave new world.
Just on celebrations, because if David Clifford does dab, everyone is going to be dabbing after that. But the other thing is, you are seeing a lot of celebrations, especially in home games. And this is the beauty of the league. And we're going to get into it in a few minutes. Celebrations into the terrace. Tony Brosnan did it when he got his goal in Tralee. Celebrated into the Kerry fans behind the goal. Did you see the Dublin steward at the weekend at the Hill?
Yeah. Yeah, loving life.
Anthony, loving life. Bloody celebrating, going nuts anytime Dublin got a score into the hill. Anthony Moyles has a bone to pick with him a little later on.
Yeah, well, Anthony Moyles is going to be with us in the 8 to 9 hour this morning. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Let's tell you what's coming up over the course of the next couple of hours. The performance rankings are on standby. Alan Quinlan will be with us at 8:10 to reflect on a crazy weekend in the Six Nations. Ireland are Grand Slam champions at under 20 level, they won the Triple Crown at senior level, and Wales beaten by Italy as England asked questions about their head coach. So plenty to ponder with Alan Quinlan at 8:10. Brian Kerr at 8:25 reacting to the weekend's football. Sports news coming your way at 25 to 9 with Cahill. Anthony Moyles, as Tommy's already plugged there, is coming your way at 10 to 9. Mark Lawrenson looking back on the FA Cup in the Premier League at 9:10, and then more Six Nations reaction coming your way at 9:30 this morning. Now, get ready to cheer Ireland on in the TikTok Women's Six Nations. To launch this year's campaign, we are giving away 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Wales on Saturday, the 26th of March at 4:45 in the RDS Arena. The lucky winners will also be entered into a draw to be in with a chance to win an overnight stay in the stunning Intercontinental Hotel on the night of the game. To enter this competition, tell us what do you think the score will be this weekend between Ireland and Wales, or wherever you're watching this morning's OTB AM. Just comment on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube. International Women's Rugby is at the RTS and there is nothing like it. Be part of the action. Get your tickets at ticketmaster.ie. Performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Well, as we do here every morning, every Monday morning on OTB AM, we go through the good, the bad and the grand of the weekend's sport. As you can see on screen, we've got a couple of interesting talking points here, Tommy. In the red, in the bad, a couple of terrible performances over the course of the weekend. And in there at number 5 is a story that we've been covering for quite some time here on the show. We have been watching the highs and the lows of the Welsh rugby team. We brought you news last year of Welsh fans projectile vomiting all over the Principality Stadium. And that wasn't even after a terrible loss. And I wonder where the projectile vomiting fans are this morning after watching their team getting beaten by Italy. Italy, the team we wanted kicked out of the Six Nations. We wanted to make this a 5 nations. We wanted promotion, relegation. We wanted Georgia in instead of Italy. That Italy have beaten your Wales in a fairly humbling moment for your team. We should say that this is actually the story of Italy, to be quite honest with you. This is the story of an amazing last gasp try, a brilliant emotional moment for the rugby people of Italy. Phenomenal commentary from the Italian commentator, which we might bring you in a little while, and just a great moment. But it is also kind of the story of Wales.
It is absolutely the story of Wales, especially here this morning on OTB AM. Anyone who knows our, I suppose, jousts and battle with Wales Online over the weekend would have been tuning in. I'm sure we've got a lot of fans here this morning hate watching already, but to do so without mentioning Italy, it was difficult not to put Italy up on screen this morning because, my God, the scenes at the final whistle. The scenes once that conversion went over. Because I think, not that there was any chance that the conversion wouldn't have been nailed, but you couldn't let the emotion out. It was nearly like a VAR goal being scored. The fact that they were still a point down. I'm seeing there that, do you know what? I don't have the Italy audio ready. I should have had the Italy audio ready this morning. It was absolutely sensational, the commentary of that try. Padovani touched it down right under the posts. But it was a Capuzzo who broke the fullback, who broke through the line, that insane break. It was unbelievable. And it makes it, I don't know, especially in the year that's in the last couple of years. Especially in the last couple of years, Italy and their place in the Six Nations being a question so much. I don't know. I don't know whether you think there should be a chance that they're out of it, but it was amazing to see those scenes at the weekend.
Yeah, I was at the Ireland match on Saturday, but even around Ballsbridge beforehand, I was just kind of meeting somebody, and it was just this massive roar, 2 massive roars from the pub across the road, and you just had to kind of run over and actually get the fact that find out what was actually happening, and it was just this joyous moment that every rugby fan wanted to see over the last little while. Like you mentioned there, that it is kind of like a VAR-like moment. Kieran Crowley, relatively stoic when they actually scored a try, and then the conversion obviously is the key moment. And I think we can actually bring you the commentary of that great moment of Italy's winning try.
Domani Capuzzo prova ad andarsene, Capuzzo Padovani, la meta dell'Italia, 21-20, bisogna realizzarla tra i pali, bisogna realizzarla. Che azione di Capuzzo, che alla fine dentro i 22 è riuscito a servire Edoardo Padovani. Che messa degli azzurri, Edoardo Padovani, il mio idolo, 21-20.
Yeah, Italy in the green really this morning, and it's Wales who have a dire Six Nations, I think it's fair to say, at the end of it all. And I mean, after last year where they looked like they were going to be the team who didn't really impress on paper and actually get the job done, it seems to have been quite a turnaround this year from Wales. But I guess, as form has sometimes shown us in the past, Wales come good on a World Cup year, and Ireland, for example, tend to fall flat. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see their graph over the next little while. We are going to come back to the rugby in just a moment elsewhere in the performance rankings, but we just want to move on to Everton, who are also in the red after their FA Cup hammering at the hands of Crystal Palace yesterday. Like, this was like possibly the definition of a sporting collapse, where they looked okay for a good section of the game, for a quarter of the game, and then once they conceded that 25th minute opener to Crystal Palace, the whole thing just fell apart. They ended up losing 4-0 to Crystal Palace, and this has been a fascinating story to watch as well over the last little while. Yes, they've had that Alexander Iwobi late winner the other night, and that may well be a crucial result for them in the grand scheme of things. The FA Cup is not going to be the thing that keeps Frank Lampard and Everton happy, or give them non-sleepless nights. They're currently in 25th on 25 points. 3 points clear of the relegation zone, ahead of Watford. When they're back in Premier League action, that'll become more into view. But Frank Lampard, not a happy camper after yesterday's 4-0 hammering. Here's what he had to say.
So much you can keep trying to butter someone up to give them confidence. There's a balance of confidence stroke. We're playing at the cutthroat end of football here. This is a quarter-final today to get to Wembley. And if you haven't got the confidence to play, then you can quickly flip it and say, have you got the to play? Sorry, excuse me, but I can't. That's the football reality. And if you fall somewhere in the middle, then don't worry about it, because we didn't play that badly today, and Palace didn't play that well today, and we lost 4-0 because of a lack of confidence and a lack of what I just said. Yeah,
Frank Lampard questioned the balls of his team after that yesterday, Tommy. He's also put a bit of pressure, not a bit of pressure, but he certainly looked back on some of the decisions that have been made at the club before he got there. He says it's a challenge because it's been there for quite a long time before I got here, and he doesn't have a magic wand to get inside people's heads and change the resilience across a whole squad. Is that the sort of thing that you feel will spur Everton on over the next little while, or do you think that it's a situation where they need the arm around the shoulder and be like, it's okay, losing 4-0 to Crystal Palace actually isn't that bad a result?
Yeah, it's very difficult to know, because that 99th minute winner late Thursday night, Alex Iwobi's winner, was like, that looked like the moment that might spark their season into place. Like, that was such a huge result against Newcastle. You saw the celebrations afterwards. There's a great video actually of Richarlison sprinting from the bench to join the celebrations, all the players together. A moment like that felt like the type of thing that might bring a season and kickstart a season, kickstart a new managerial reign. Has this been the worst manager's bounce that any manager has ever had going into a new club? Like, Lampard just really hasn't got a tune out of them at all. Looking on yesterday, I was kind of half thinking, because they've been dragged into the relegation battle, not that they threw the FA Cup quarter-final or that they didn't turn up and try it, but did it really matter to Everton that they weren't? They didn't make it through. They need to stay up in the Premier League this year.
The result does not matter, I guess, when they're looking at what's going to be important to them at the end of the season. But it is just another moment that exposes where they are as a team at the moment. And if you've got your manager coming out lambasting you after that, then it's not a fantastic moment to be in. Like, I mean, their next couple of fixtures are obviously huge. They play West Ham after the international break, and then it's Burnley, which is obviously a massive game. West Ham at the weekend just looks so tired and exhausted, and you want to be playing West Ham after a Europa League game, for example, after one of the Lyon games, as opposed to after an international break. So that's actually a very, very tricky fixture for them. They have to play Manchester United, they have to play Liverpool, they have to play Chelsea, they have to play Arsenal, they have to go to Leicester City before the end of the season. Those are the things.
They were due to play Watford this weekend, obviously, in a 6-pointer. Like, does the signing of Iwobi just sum up the misspent money at Everton and the mismanagement over the last couple of years? When you look at Arsenal's setup at the minute, how they cleared out so much deadwood, and they are operating with such a young team at the minute and playing so well, playing football in the way that Arteta wants to play. And then you realise that Everton spent the guts of 40 million euros on Alex Iwobi a couple of years ago. As an Arsenal fan, were you worried when Iwobi was leaving? Were you happy when they got that much from him?
Not at all. I think that you weren't worried whatsoever. I think that he kind of reached a point, and it was almost predictable that he was going to go to Everton. There was that feeling. So he moved in 2019, 3 years ago. He's 22, so there was obviously the potential for him to go and explode at a different club. And look, I mean, maybe Everton fans will say the last gasp winner the other night is something that will kickstart him, but I mean, it's at the age of 25 now, you're kind of looking for a number of different kickstarts to his career. So no, it's been a bit of a flop, and it's probably a little bit of hindsight being 2020, but there was certainly an element that you could probably see coming over the last little while that Iwobi wasn't going to make it, or wasn't going to repay that transfer fee. Those are in the red this morning, Wales and Everton. We are putting Gaelic football this morning into the amber. Tommy, why is that?
We're putting Gaelic football in the amber because I think it's very clear that we're playing our best competition at the worst time of the year. We are now coming into the final round of the leagues. I make it probably out of 32 counties, you've got about 24, 25 with something to play for. All 8 teams in Division 3 have something to play for, whether it be relegation or promotion at the weekend. 4 teams in Division 4 can get promoted this weekend. Meath and Clare are the only 2 teams in Division 2 that don't really have anything to play for now. And saying that, even Clare need to get a result of some sort up and down. Down are already out. Kerry are through to the league final, and they're likely to play either Mayo or Armagh, so maybe Kerry are the only team that don't have something to play for in the final day. Kildare, Donegal, Tyrone, Dublin, Monaghan are all in relegation battles this weekend. Next weekend in the National Football League is going to be insanely competitive. It's going to be crazy. The one issue that we've got this weekend is that Tipperary and London are playing on Saturday night. If that game doesn't get moved to Sunday, which is the same at 2 o'clock on Sunday, the same time as all the other Division 4 games, it means that Leitrim and Sligo on the Sunday will end up being a dead rubber if Tipperary beat London on Saturday night. That's the one issue we have with the league this weekend. It is a bloody brilliant competition. But Eoin, it's been so difficult to get a read on form for the first 4 weeks of the season. They've been played in such terrible weather, horrendous winds, rain. I was obviously the definition of a fair weather fan, complaining about the rain down in Tralee last weekend. You're well used to being there in all sorts of conditions. Like, if we could just flip it and put this competition to the summer, I think we would have the finest product of sport in the land. Like, it is so competitive. Even Clare and Meath yesterday, poor game of football. Both teams cancelled each other out, but it went down to the wire and it was dramatic, and that's all people care about. Whereas we're going to walk into a competition in 3 weeks' time, and yes, there's going to be headline games like Mayo Galway, but there's going to be so many mismatches in the provincial championships already. And then when it gets to the Tailteann Cup, we're going to have the issues that we're seeing, which is that these games just aren't going to get the coverage. Unless there's a new media deal ripped up, unless there's games streamed live on YouTube or GABO, we're just not going to see enough of the games. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel this weekend. It's a bit of a poison chalice. The league is going to be over next week, and it might be our most competitive Sunday of the entire year.
Yeah, and like, it has, even within all these conditions, been really good. Those conditions being bad weather, the fact that the incentive actually isn't overly there to win it for the top teams. Like, as I said earlier on, I think that the atmosphere would actually be better at a ground where you've got 2 relegation threatened teams in Division 1 going up against one another, as opposed to 2 teams chasing the league title, because the league title, like, isn't all that important. Staying in Division 1 is more important than that. Getting those games consistently year after year is what teams want to get out of the league. That actually, if you add in the fact that that could have been a race towards an All-Ireland title in better weather as well, in the middle of summer, in bigger stadiums quite often when it comes to some of these counties. You'd have an even better version of what is already the best version of Gaelic football that we're getting. So I think what this does over the next little while is that it shows up maybe the decision that they came to last year not to implement the moving of the league to the summertime. And I think it'll continue to show up the provincial championships in particular over the next little while, because what you've got is these brilliant games over the next little while, and then obviously there's going to be a couple of hammerings dished out in the provincial championships, and it's inevitable and it's obvious, and that is the true definition, I would say, of a dead rubber. The idea that you know exactly what the result is going to be before the game takes place, and that unfortunately is going to be the case for a lot of those fixtures that take place in the provincial championships.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Just to give a mention to a couple of games this coming weekend, Monaghan Dublin. That's a relegation playoff in Monaghan. That is going to be a belter. Tyrone have to win in Kerry. Kildare need to beat Mayo away from home. Shout out to Kildare, by the way, 24 points to put up against Monaghan at the weekend. And then in Division 2, Cork and Offaly, the losers go down. In Division 3, there's a lot of drama. I don't know if you saw it, but Fermanagh and Westmeath drew at the weekend, 1-9 to 12 points. But late in the second half, Sean Quigley got a ball. And I'm telling you, this ball went over the black spot. I'm not sure if you saw it, but the umpires flagged it wide. So Fermanagh now are in a bit of bother. They should have had an extra point there. They should have actually probably beaten Westmeath. I know other things might happen in the last 10 minutes. But in Division 3, Antrim and Louth are at the top. Westmeath, Limerick and Fermanagh can also still make it into the promotion playoff for Division 2 next year, which is massive. Longford, Laois and Wicklow are kind of all playing off to get out there. Cavan are in control in Division 4. As I said, Leitrim and Sligo, that's a bit of a provincial playoff for that final promotion slot. But if Tipperary get the job done against London, they're going to go up with Cavan. So a lot to play for this weekend in the National Football Leagues. Yeah,
for sure. What's the best version of events do you think that could happen in Division 1 over the course of this weekend? This is the last weekend of it. What way do you see it going?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to predict. It's hard. I think Jack O'Connor is still going to pick a relatively strong Kerry team against Tyrone. I think he might rest a couple of players, but also you got to remember those Kerry players are playing for their position. So I'm not sure Kerry are going to make anything easy for Tyrone this weekend as they travel down. They're in need of a win. Monaghan Dublin is going to be really, really interesting because we've started to see Dublin coming back into form. They really looked at home yesterday, a sunny afternoon in Croke Park. Niall Scully scored a brilliant goal. He went for goal himself, tried to chip the keeper from 40, 50 yards. Brian Howard was swinging over beauties with the outside of the boot. Brian Fenton was back in his groove. James McCarthy was starting. Dublin looked really good yesterday. They were motoring really well. They really looked like the Dublin team that we've seen over the last couple of years. And then Monaghan, they've been one of the stories of the last decade, their ability to stay in Division 1 for so long with, such small resources at their disposal. That was such a flat performance against Kildare. Kildare were well in control for the majority of that game. Conceding 24 points is massive. Monaghan could well be going down this weekend, but again, at home to Dublin, you never know what they might turn around. And then Mayo Kildare is probably the game to watch. Mayo are trying to make it into a league final. When you say that some teams don't care that much about winning the National Football League, I agree. I think there's an element of, over the last couple of years, you can see with Mayo, at certain stages in their development, some teams don't need to win the league. They just need to get, battles into the system or get their players playing games where they might be up against their backs against the wall. I feel like Mayo could really do it winning the league this year. They've got the back-to-back All-Ireland finals, which they've lost. They won a league a couple of years ago. Was it back in 2019? They beat Kerry. I think for the development of this team, quite a young team, they need to experience winning in Croke Park again. And I think it would be a big one for them to get to a league final and win that. So I think Kildare might be up against it. I think Monaghan are going to be up against it. And again, I think Tyrone are going to be up against it. So I'm not sure if I'm giving Donegal much up against Armagh. I think they're going to be playing to win too. So
the Dubs are staying up. You're saying the Dubs are staying up?
I think the Dubs are going to stay up this weekend. But I think Monaghan, if any team could be difficult to play away in the last game of the season, I think it could be up in Monaghan.
Are the Dubs actually back? We've had 2 weeks of them winning now at this point. And it does seem that the signs are getting a lot more positive. The opposition the last couple of weeks, maybe not as good as some of the teams they played in the first 3 weeks in particular of the National League, but there is also the sense that Dublin are just able to grind these things out again. That there is definitely an air of early season Dubs of 3 or 4 years ago off this team again, where they weren't amazing in those years in the National League, but there was still enough of a gulf between them and the rest for them to win games by 4 or 5 points regularly.
Yeah, I don't think we've overreacted at all with Dublin Own. I think we were all analysing what was in front of us, and it was that this Dublin team were so alien to the Dubs that we had witnessed, that insane team we saw from even 2015 to 2021, if you want to take the 6 years. Are they back? I never felt they fully went away. Like, even against Kildare, they're beaten. It was amazing to see it. They were fallible. They were making mistakes. But they had 3 unbelievable goal chances, like 3 glaring goal chances, each of them from about 3 yards out that they failed to score. They definitely are playing with a bit more swagger. They're in a bit of a groove. Con O'Callaghan's going to come back soon. There was a question hanging over them, and James Dunn, who made it on the Football Pod a couple of weeks ago, that it's next to impossible to get up to championship speed if you haven't played 3 or 4 games in the league. That is very, very difficult. He would have battled back from injuries himself. Now, I would argue that Dublin are going to make it through Leinster without much bother once again. Are they set to face Kildare in the Leinster semi-final? If they get by that, I think Dublin are going to be cooking well enough for a championship semi-final. But for the first time in a long time, if the Dubs have any injuries, like other teams, if the Dubs are missing a Con O'Callaghan or a Kieran Kilkenny in the summer, well, that's when the trouble is going to be. Yeah, for sure. Let's move on to the green this morning on the performance rankings. By the way, I should say that OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Every week, we are giving away Gillette Labs shaving kit. So to be in with a chance of winning, just let us know who you think should make the performance rankings. The best place to enter is the Off the Ball Instagram page. You'll see the comments box in our story. Plenty of good shouts there this morning. You've got Xavi's Barcelona and Aubameyang in with a shout there on El Clasico, a big win for them last night against Real Madrid. But to bring us on to the green this morning, the football we're going with is Tottenham Hotspur as the race for the top 4 heats up. They beat West Ham United 3-1 yesterday, courtesy of my own goal and 2 goals from Heung-min Son as well. This Antonio Conte pattern continues. Every loss that they have is followed by a win, and every win that they have is followed by a loss. It does feel, though, that they're ready to start stringing a few results together. They've got Newcastle, Villa, Brighton, Brentford next up. Arsenal very much looking over their shoulder. A vital win for them on Saturday against Aston Villa, and Manchester United still very much in the mix. That result yesterday probably puts West Ham out of the picture for the top 4 at this spot. We've got a proper 3-horse race. Arsenal with a 3-point cushion and a 1-game cushion on Tottenham, but they have to play each other. That is one of those situations where it's going to be high stakes, do not bottle it sort of situation when Arsenal do play Tottenham whenever that game gets refixed for. It's going to be hard until we actually see that happen to know whether or not Arsenal have the bottle. But it definitely feels that the way that they've ground out a few results, it looks positive. But we're putting Spurs in the green, Tommy, because Conte feels is ready, as I say, to go on a bit of a run with this team, and that he's finally got this team clicking. I was surprised to see Spurs in the green this morning, Owen. I thought you might have put Arsenal in there. It was a massive win they got against Villa. They may not have been playing as well as they have been in recent weeks. Spurs are on a roll with Conte. I was surprised to see, and we're going to hear from Brian Kerr a little later, Brian doesn't reckon that Spurs are going to have enough to make the top 4. So whether that's the fact that he thinks they'll fall short against Arsenal in that 6-pointer, I think it's fair to say that this race for the top 4 is going to give the National Football League a run for its money over the next couple of weeks. United and Arsenal are set to face in the middle of April too, aren't they? Yeah. Or is that 2nd of April? So that's going to be a huge match as well. It feels like Arsenal are in control, though. It feels like Arsenal with that game in hand. It's all within their own destiny. They can control it themselves. They're playing so well. I think Arsenal are in prime position here to take that 4th Champions League spot. I was quite concerned about what would happen if they received a bit of a setback, and you looked at that Liverpool fixture and you were like, there's going to be a setback coming right at you down the track. Liverpool will almost certainly win that game because their recent record against Arsenal is so good. And I was definitely a bit concerned that once Liverpool won that game, that it was going to be a situation where they'd draw against Aston Villa or struggle to get across the line, and in actual fact they ground a result at 1-0, which definitely suggests to me a mental strength, which you're still loath to say. You're still never sure if you can actually say that sort of stuff out loud in case you look like an idiot in a couple of weeks' time. But it definitely feels that they managed to brush that result off, and like their fixture list in the very short term isn't that bad. But you're right, it's those fixtures in April which are going to be absolutely vital, and they're going to determine whether or not it's going to be Champions League football for them next season. But Tottenham, I think, have got huge momentum behind them at the moment, and I don't think anybody else in the Arsenal or Manchester United camps
have anything like the relationship that Son and Kane have at the moment. And I think Kulusevski's been an absolutely outstanding signing.
He's been class.
I think they're looking brilliant going forward. So I really do think that there's going to be another twist, or there's possibly going to be another twist in that tail for the top four before the end of the season. Before we finish up in the performance rankings, in number 1 place is France. They get the job done. They get the Grand Slam. It's been a long time since we've seen France in the winners' enclosure in the Six Nations, but I think a lot of us would have predicted this coming at the start of the year. The one question was whether or not they would have had the mental strength to get over the line and see it out. And there was definitely a few hiccups throughout this year's Six Nations, Tommy, where you thought, right, could France actually bottle this? Like maybe even in the game against Wales the previous week, you thought, right, this thing could collapse on them. What I do think, though, is that I think France are better than even this suggests. Yes, they have a Grand Slam in their hands, but they don't even have the best scoring difference. Ireland have the best scoring difference coming out of this Six Nations. I think that they've actually dealt with a lot of the anxiety and got over the line, and they've got their hands on the Grand Slam. And I think that is a huge, huge mountain for them to climb as this young team tries to conquer next year. They're not keeping any secrets. They're not making any bones about the fact that they know that they're a World Cup contender at home at the end of next year. And once they got that first Grand Slam off the back, I think that they could do another one next year. I think they could do back-to-back championships at least. And I think this team is going to be around, obviously, for a very, very long time. So France, obviously, in the green and the Grand Slam for them. A brilliant team to watch as well, Tommy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Eoin. I think it was the psychological factor of it was massive for France this time around. It's fair to say that while the score difference was what it was, Ireland were quite a bit ahead. And, you know, England and Wales are 11 points off Ireland in second. Like, they've finished on 10 points, two of them. It is fair to say that France were the best team. Even though it was only a point in the difference, France were definitely the best team this time around. The hype is real. I think it's interesting that they had those couple of hiccups and they came through them. Winners, good winners, always find a way to win. I think Ireland's Grand Slam a couple of years ago, the year of Le Drop with Sexton, we found a way to win those games that year. We may not have been playing, you know, at 110% of what we could do. It was a pity that was the pinnacle of that team and the peak that we hit. I don't think that this is going to be the peak of France that we've seen so far. I think France are primed. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year in the Six Nations. Like, do you taper off a little bit next year in the Six Nations in anticipation of the World Cup, or are you trying to win back-to-back Grand Slams? It's hard to know. But there was a couple of moments, was like genuinely, I had a couple of points Paddy's Day. Was trying to keep half an eye on the game, or not Paddy's Day on Saturday. I was trying to keep half an eye on the game. Was there ever a chance that England were going to get over the line to beat them? They had a chance for half-time for a try that kind of fell short. Was there ever a real danger that France were going to lose on Saturday night?
I think there's probably a more real danger that the France were going to lose than Ireland were going to lose in their game against Scotland, to be honest. And I think England probably got their things together in the second half when they were really up against it, but it was just too late. And I didn't think before the game that depending on England for a favour was an overly likely outcome. And we will get into England a little bit later on with Alan Quinlan as well, because a whole heap of questions about where they're at the moment. Like, based on absolutely nothing and based on just pure kind of history and trends, I do think that maybe next year England will just show up and all of a sudden they're a big contender again, especially with Eddie Jones at the helm. But whether or not Eddie Jones is even going to be head coach at the start of next year's Six Nations, I think if you're reading the papers this morning, that very much remains to be seen, because a lot of people don't necessarily want him in charge at the moment. One last thing to finish up this morning on with the performance rankings. It is, I would say, one of the stories of the weekend. The Formula One was back to Bahrain Grand Prix, so the return of Ferrari, a real return for Ferrari. A lot of people predicted beforehand that this was going to be a big season for them. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz with a 1-2 finish in the opening race of the season. So that is a massive storyline. But it's not the big storyline. The big storyline, as ever with modern Formula One, is whether or not Gunther Steiner is happy. Like, I mean, he has entertained all of us in Drive to Survive being a grumpy man, because he is very, very funny when he is a grumpy man. He is the most likeable person in possibly any sport ever, and we just all want to see Gunther Steiner do well. So I think people will forgive me for saying that I think this was a good news story over the weekend, that they got points on the board. They got Mick Schumacher in at 11th, but in at 5th place they got Kevin Magnussen, making a return to Formula One with a top 5 finish. Absolutely incredible, but most importantly, this guy was happy.
Look at that smile. We've missed that smile, Gunther.
Yeah, I missed it as well. I think, no, it was what the whole team did. I mean, if you think about the last 2 years and then coming back like this, it's I mean, you cannot write a story like this, in my opinion. But the guys, I mean, the guys on the racetrack the last 2 years, I mean, they had tough times, but they kept their head low, learned, and the pit stops today were good. Everything was just fine, and they took the last year to get ready for a better car, and the guys delivered a good car this year. So it's all down to the team. They can be all very proud. I mean, I'm proud of them, you know. So it's just fantastic. I mean, I can't say more, you know. It's but it's all down to the team, you know. Kevin did a fantastic job. I mean, for him, a comeback like this, he wouldn't have dreamt of, I think, you know. But things happen in life. A month ago, it was a complete different scenario, and now all of a sudden we are fifth.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
It is 8:10. You're with us here on OTB AM, a packed show still to come. We're talking rugby with Alan Quinlan next. But first, here's Shane Byrne and Cian Tracy with Will O'Callaghan discussing the performance of Dan Sheahan.
Tomorrow, like it's such an interesting story. Like I said, like I'm down here at Musgrave Park now, hopefully about to watch the Ireland under-20s win a Grand Slam. But when when Dan Sheahan was coming through, he didn't actually make the under-20 squad initially. By the time the World Cup came around, he ended up getting in because, like, ironically enough, Ronan Kelleher got injured. He was overlooked for a place in the Leinster Academy because Leinster went for Ronan Kelleher instead, which is fair enough. You have two outstanding hookers, so you're dead right. He went off and he played with Trinity in the AIL. Did an unbelievable job under Tony Smith, who's just done fantastic work with so many Leinster players, a really unheralded guy in sort of the Irish system. But then he went on to Lansdowne and kind of really got a bit of an edge about him. So we see so many guys kind of, you know, coming out of school and playing 20s and they're kind of household names, your Gary Ringroses, your James Ryans, by the time they get to international stage. It's been a bit of a slow burner for Dan Sheahan. Like, the guy is still only 23, but his rise over the last year, I was looking back and this weekend last year, he was coming off the bench playing his 10th ever game for Leinster in a home defeat to the Ospreys. So in 12 months, he's now gone to the Stade de France, he's now gone to Twickenham, and he's played a massive part in Ireland winning a Triple Crown. He's featured in all 5 games this year, so it's been a remarkable 12 months for him. And like you said, he's just such a, like, we don't usually produce kind of athletes with his kind of profile, and I think that's what's so exciting about it. I think Shane kind of hit the nail on the head. He'll be so much better, I think, for the experience that he had in Twickenham, because, like we talked about Cian Healy, it's about problem solving on the hoof, you know. Like, it's not waiting for the analysis Monday morning review and the coaches to hold your hand and say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. So I think this experience will have been unbelievable for him throughout the Six Nations, and I thought he just capped it off yesterday. He's such an explosive presence.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Imagine actually having a team of Galton, Miedema, Russo and Blacksonians together.
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
It was already a goal. The ball had crossed the line.
It wasn't even a question. It was about a metre and a half, and they didn't even appeal.
I suppose 92nd minute. I've never scored a 92nd minute winner. I don't know what it feels like.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
14 minutes past 8. You're welcome back to OTB AM. We are reacting to the weekend's rugby with Alan Quinlan, who's with us on the line. Alan, how are you getting on?
Good on now, and yourself?
Yeah, very well. So if we start with the senior men on Saturday, I guess if we look at the season as a whole, the Six Nations as a whole, plenty scored, not a lot conceded, a Triple Crown in the bag, and also still a long way to go, it feels, before next year and the World Cup. I think that's a pretty positive way to be coming out of this year's Six Nations, right?
Yeah, it is, Owen. I think there's it kind of had a strange feel to it on Saturday. I think there was an expectation that, you know, Ireland were going to win this comfortably. They did in the end. Scotland were pretty fired up, in a desperate kind of situation, given the controversies they had in the Scottish camp that kind of came out on Friday. A lot of pressure on Gregor Townsend in Scotland, so they were always going to, put in a serious fight. But I thought Ireland were good at times, made some mistakes and errors. They're not the finished article, I think. So they've gone through the tournament with 4 from 5 wins. So I think that's a pretty good return. I think they'll still be a little bit frustrated about what happened in Paris against a very good French side, but overall they'll be very pleased, and they played some brilliant rugby throughout this tournament.
It's no harm being a little bit frustrated the year before World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that, what do Ireland need to get better at? Well, they gave away 50 penalties in 5 games. If you go back right to the start, when they were a really dominant performance against Wales, 6 penalties in that game. If you want to be really dominant and kind of get close to an indicator of your dominance, and discipline is a big part of it. And I think, the 6 penalties against Wales would indicate that, Ireland were very disciplined, had a lot of ball, made good decisions, didn't turn over the ball as much. We're trying to play this expansive game, but the penalties do hurt you. If you're in the double figures, it's hard to win games. Now, Ireland did have turnovers conceded in that game. There was 19, which is still pretty high. And that's probably one area where, if you want to get better, if this team wants to get better, is protecting the ball. 85 turnovers in the 5 games. It's a bit high. It is too high. It's too high. There's no doubt about that. The type of game they're playing on, I think they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to lose the ball and knock it on at times, and some passes aren't going to stick. But turnovers conceded is right across the board. That's lineouts and drop balls, loose passes, breakdown work. It's the full package. So their knock-on turnovers were kind of fairly low, I think, but that's an area where they need to prove probably discipline and the turnovers conceded. You can always get better at different parts. So obviously the scrum, the scrum against England, there was a couple of scrums late on in the game, and getting more depth in the squad. But to score 24 tries and concede 4, they're not winning the tournament. France are winning the tournament. They only scored 17. So does that really matter? But it's an indicator and a pleasing indicator from an Irish point of view that they're attacking. Their game has improved a lot, and I think that's where probably we were kind of inadequate at the last World Cup. The ability to take scores and create scores out of moments of pressure. So I think they've expanded their game brilliantly, and it's a really pleasing return. I think, it's not ideal, but to have England and France away in the Six Nations is always the harder proposition, and to win, it just goes to show what they did in 2018 was incredible. To win in Paris in that first game, and then the bonus point victory in Twickenham, or the big win in Twickenham at the end for the Triple Crown, the Grand Slam, was phenomenal. But plenty to work on, and I think, but still very, very positive signs about where they're going.
Rob Kearney was making the point at the weekend that Ireland need to be careful to not get a reputation about the lack of depth that they have in that front row, that if they get late into a game and I guess the subs are coming on, that they don't get this sense that the refs will just penalise them because they know that they're going to be creamed up front over a period of time. So how do Ireland go about changing that over the next little while, assuming that a generationally gifted other loosehead doesn't also emerge, for example, as a backup to a fully fit Porter?
It's perception, isn't it? It's crowd perception, and sometimes referees are swayed if you're away from home. A scrum tweaks or twists or turns somewhere, and the home crowd are going crazy. The referee kind of goes with that pressure. you want to try and, you always hear the word creating a picture of the picture the referee sees in the scrums, because sometimes there's penalties awarded for one side, and you look back in replays and you think that penalty should have went the other way. And it's very difficult on the referees, because sometimes it is an interpretation and there's things that they don't see, and you have the benefit of seeing it in replays. But I think it's the perception of the referees as well. And that does happen. It does happen if you have, this narrative that there's issues that with any team scrum, you go with the narrative when someone gets that go forward situation in a game. So how do you change that? You just make sure that you're kind of squeaky clean in the pictures you're providing to referees, not just on the day, but there's no examples when the referees meet up, the international referees, and they have their conversations at different stages of years before tournaments, that there's no pictures of Ireland scrum that they're illegal, or that they're under massive pressure, or that they can't scrummage square. So that's something that you have to work on. But I think getting Andrew Porter and Ronan Kelleher back will help massively. The experience that Dan Sheahan would have had from a scrummaging point of view, and the different sorts of pressure that he's incredible around the field. And it's just making sure that you get that part of your game right as well. And trying to get some more depth as well, of course. You want more depth there. Cian Healy's been around a long time and has had a phenomenal career, but you need impact off the bench. Dave Kilcoyne came on the other day and was very good as well. And sometimes when you're chasing a game, you're going to get those penalties that go against you. And there was a couple in the scrum. Again, that picture wasn't correct. So it's something that Ireland need to really work on.
Finding that depth is an interesting one, because I guess the Dan Sheahan emergence has come from an unfortunate injury to Ronan Kelleher. Now, in fairness, people have been talking up Dan Sheahan for quite some time, and he's obviously a brilliant rugby player. But are there other areas of the pitch that you would have liked to have seen Ireland explore a little bit more depth in before the end of this year's Six Nations? And I ask that obviously in the context of the next three games being New Zealand.
I'm not sure. I think Ireland needed to have a good Six Nations and needed to challenge for it, because you're talking about a narrative of scrums. Everybody's talking about Ireland now, that they're right up there again with one of the best teams in the world. France are probably being ranked number one. New Zealand will certainly have something to say about that in the summer. South Africa as well. So, but just from a Northern Hemisphere point of view, there's France and Ireland have been better than the rest, and so they're in a good place now. And when teams play Ireland now and going forward, I think they'll know they're playing against a very, very good attacking side. I think a lot of the French players were stunned at the accuracy and the way Ireland attacked in that second half, and just their overall ambition. I spoke to a few contacts in close to the team, and they were really incredibly impressed with the way Ireland played in that second half. And obviously they realised that if they let Ireland keep going like this, they're going to win the game. But their reaction and just their ability to attack, that's something that we weren't talking about in the last few years on. So building on I think if you look at the back three with Hugo Keane, James Lowe, Andrew Conway, Mac Hansen, Balakoon, Jordan Larmour, we're getting a real kind of depth chart there, which is brilliant. Concern would be if because Keenan has been so good under the high ball and what he's done, who can play full back if they step in there. But, Andy Farrell has introduced a lot of players to this team in the last 18 months, and players who you'd be, very confident can get better, learn from their experiences being in around the squad. So I wouldn't have made any more changes really, because, you're trying to win a Six Nations, but the summer tour will be really interesting. It's not really a tour that you're kind of going, well, we'll experiment too much there. But the whole experience have been, there'll be one or two maybe surprises going that tour. But I believe, and look, from the players that are there, the vast majority of them, one or two are in their 30s and the wrong side of 30. But he's got to make a decision now very quickly about who goes to the World Cup and who doesn't in his own mind. I know it's a long way out still. You've got a summer tour, November internationals, another Six Nations. So I think there's no real situation I go that this player should have got more game time. Mike Lowry and Robert Calico, James Hume, they bring a lot of excitement, youth and enthusiasm. And I think they're going to have a big say when it comes to the World Cup. They could be starters by then.
Yeah, for sure. If we look back then at some of the storylines of the Six Nations as a whole, I guess it doesn't really get any bigger than the Sexton succession plan. And I'm just interested in your thoughts on what we learned on Saturday about it, because I guess I did feel after the France game that Joey Carbery was in with a real shot of taking that 10 jersey, at least for a little while. And then it feels that he loses that opportunity against Italy, and there's more distance now between Sexton and Carbery than there was before that France game, it feels. Is that a misreading the situation, or do you go along with that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what happened in Paris was Joey Carbery's performance and what he did there, I think, was very pleasing. Didn't have this phenomenal performance and incredible Irish win, but he played well. I think there was probably a few faults in his performance. Nobody has a perfect performance, but I just thought Saturday would have been an opportunity to get him on the pitch earlier, deal with that situation. When you have your captain and it's a Triple Crown and he hasn't played much in the last few weeks himself, it's a difficult one, but he's got to start in New Zealand. I think that'll be another step for him to start one of those tests in New Zealand. But getting him on earlier on Saturday would have been something that I would have liked to have seen. Closing the gap is about, Joey Carbery needs to play well for Munster now for the rest of the season. He needs to get loads of games under his belt and avoid some injuries, hopefully, because one of the big problems with him at different times is his lack of match practice and match hardness that you get. But there's no quick fix solution to the level that Sexton plays at and what he can do. But that's still an area for concern. If Johnny Sexton gets an injury or something happens to him, doesn't make the World Cup, there is a bit of a difference, and that's still there. But I'd be confident that Carbery, if he finished the season strong and he gets a good run, he needs a bit of luck too with injuries. But you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in this situation, because your captain is your number 10. And I think New Zealand has to start to test New Zealand and deal with that pressure of what he did in Paris again and try and build on it.
In a way, is the current situation the ideal situation for the Ireland coaching ticket, because you've got Sexton as your starter and Carbery as your substitute, who, as we saw at the weekend, was brought on at full back, that you have somebody on the bench who can cover two positions, and if something happened to Hugo Keane in mid-match, you have a ready-made substitute there as well. Did they almost prefer Carbery as a bench given his versatility, or I guess the apparent versatility?
I don't know. I think they should have brought him on earlier. Right. Even if they weren't taking Johnny Sexton off, I think they should have brought him on, but 20-25 minutes to go would have been an opportunity for him. My son was watching back and some stuff on YouTube, and I was watching Joey Carbery the other day and playing for Leinster and playing at full back, and just the broken field running and the confidence and the sidestep and the ability to put passes and put people away. He's an incredibly talented player. So, it would have been a great opportunity to get him on earlier. It didn't happen. As I said, I hope he plays and does really well for Munster between now and the end of the season himself, and just gets lots of games. But having a playmaker like him, and he hasn't probably played at fullback for a while, but he's a player that they've got to try and get the best out of. We know he's talented. They've got to try and find a way to get between here and the World Cup, optimise his talents and make sure his confidence is pretty high if they can.
Just rewind then to earlier on Saturday afternoon, seeing Italy finally get over the line, finally get the job done, getting a win on the board in the Six Nations. It has to go down as one of the great recent moments in Six Nations.
It was incredible. I don't know where Wales, how it happened and why they were... I think with Alan Wynne-Jones coming back, 150 caps, Dan Bigger, 100 caps, incredible characters. They've contributed so much to Welsh rugby and international rugby, British and Irish Lions. Did they get sidetracked? Did they, the Welsh team, the Welsh crowd take their eye off the ball a little bit? And let's be honest, that performance kind of blew everyone away, really. We didn't see it coming. They'd lost their previous 36 Six Nations matches in a row. They ran Scotland close last week. There were certainly moments in that game where I thought there's potential here, and Kieran Crowley is making progress with them. But just when they get into crucial areas, they're lacking that precision, that patience, that accuracy to capitalise and score tries. And they give up a couple of long-range tries to Scotland last week, and then they fight back at the end. And I thought, well, it's a better performance. So we didn't see this performance coming. We didn't see this result. And I would have played against Marco Bortolami a lot, the former Italian captain. He's a great fella, and he's obviously very passionate about Italian rugby. I was in touch with him a few weeks ago. When there was a lot of talk about South Africa and booting Italy out and replacing Italy, and we've all had an opinion on that over the years. And I know if you're a Welsh person this morning, you're not pleased being the ones kind of that Italy finally got that win against, but it's so significant and so important for them. And it was incredible. I think anyone who would have seen that or even picked up on it since. To see that kind of emotion in sport when Garbisi kicks the conversion, and just their whole reaction was really special. And it was a lovely moment for them. And for the likes of Castro Giovanni, Marco Bortolami, the Bergamasco brothers, all these people, Sergio Parise, who put so much into Italian rugby, and they're incredibly passionate about playing for their country. I think it was a special moment for all those guys as well. And unfortunately, from a Welsh point of view, they're the ones that lost the game, and they have their issues, and that's a big concern. But the Six Nations needed this. They needed Italy to beat somebody, and hopefully it continues. Hopefully they can build and get stronger. But it was just a lovely moment. One of those moments in sport that you go, wow, to see that passion and emotion from people, and it was a lovely moment for them.
Yeah, it was absolutely class. Like, if we look at that question around Italy at the moment, and maybe it's not an exact science whatsoever, but if you make a cursory glance at the under-20s table and seeing Italy not finishing bottom, not finishing second bottom in that table, does that give you hope that maybe those questions will just fade into the background a little bit?
They beat England. Their under-20s beat England. They've won 3 games in their 20s, I think, and they beat Wales yesterday. So it was an incredible weekend for them to win. That gives you hope and confidence. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to start winning lots of international games, but you for the Six Nations, I think it's for them to avoid a wooden spoon again and to win a game was absolutely brilliant. And I think there's a lot of good players there. The connection and that kind of ruthlessness and this ability to win matches has been lacking. They make too many errors when they get into crucial areas. But that kind of optimism a few weeks ago when they beat England under 20s kind of started, and there was a lot of negative stuff going on around them being out of the Six Nations. So it'll be brilliant, to be able to go to Rome or have Italy come to Dublin, and us not expecting this big result, this bonus point victory, that it's going to be a tough game, and that you have to work hard, and that you never know, you may lose in Rome. Everyone would love that, to see that for in the tournament from the outside looking in. And they still have a bit to go, and a long way to go, and it's work in progress. But to get a win like that, and particularly for it to be away from home, was incredible. Even the optimism around what Ireland did this tournament, but also the under-20s winning a Grand Slam yesterday.
Yeah.
That's brilliant for Irish rugby. You know, you're box ticking there a situation. You're saying, well, you know, there's a Grand Slam for our under-20s. We're doing something right. The programs are working. There's a lot of good young players now potentially would come through from that under-20s. Nobody really gave them much of a shout before the start of the tournament. Richie Murphy, the head coach, who's done a wonderful job, was talking them down. Wasn't really sure where they were going to be at themselves. Worried about the physicality and the size when you play France and England. The win over in Paris for those under-20s, well, they'll never forget that. You know, people often ask me about different stages of my career, matches, and you remember certain games. Those young fellas will never forget that win in Paris. And, you know, they were on the back foot for long periods of that game, but the way they dug in there, won it at the end with that Ben Brownlee try. And yesterday down in Cork, being able to win a Grand Slam, they were utterly dominant and blew Scotland away. So there's certainly a number of those under-20 guys will come through and play professional rugby and hopefully go on and play for the national side, the senior side.
So what happened, Alan? Why didn't those fears about Ireland in the under-20s actually come to be? Was it literally just talking things down, or is this? No,
I think with a lot of these players, and it's for all, you know, with COVID, a lot of the under-20 players would have missed out on schools games and under-19 games in the last 2 years. They would have been they were the first to be kind of canned and cancelled. You know, those games weren't played behind closed doors. Tournaments were cancelled. So they didn't play a lot of age grade rugby in the last 2 years because of COVID. So it was a little bit unknown. And when you're playing England and France, the depth charts they have, there's a couple of players that weren't available to Richie Murphy through injury, particularly in the second row. So there was a kind of a fear that maybe, you know, physically they weren't ready. Look at Conor O'Tierney, the second row, who's played throughout the tournament. He's only 18. He's playing second row, you know. There's a big difference there being an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. I know he's 19 in a few weeks, but he's underage again next year. There's a good few of these are. So it's a brilliant return for Richie Murphy and the under-20 side, and Bruce, great optimism and hope for that these players can come through and an excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan Quinlan, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thanks all.
Quinny there, of course, is the host of the Red 78 podcast as well, which you can get on the OTB Sports app. It is 8:38 on this Monday morning, and OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Cathal Malani is with us in studio. Cathal, how are you getting on?
Morning, Eoin. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Good.
Talk us through your weekend escapades. Tommy was with us earlier. He was in Cusack Park. Where did the weekend take you?
I was on Derry and Galway yesterday in Division 2, so very impressive from Galway, I have to say. They were really, really good. Derry, I think, actually won the toss, and there was a really strong breeze down the field in Owenbeg, and they actually opted to play against it. So Galway pushed right up in the kick-out. 3 goals in the first half. They got one then after half-time as well to put the game to bed. But that was the one that got them back to Division 1. So really, really good from Galway. I think they're motoring very nicely, and they're probably able to throw an eye now onto Mayo in the Connacht Championship in a couple of weeks' time. I think a month's time, or maybe 5 weeks' time. They play Roscommon next week, so they've already got promotion secure, and obviously we'll have a league final to come as well. Been an eye-opener for Derry the last 2 weeks, though. They were, you know, I know a lot of people thinking that they were Ulster Championship contenders, but to ship 4 goals yesterday, and they struggled at times against Roscommon the week before. So they still in with a chance of going up. They play, I think, Meath next week, so they're still in with a reasonable shout of going up. But I think an eye opener for them over the last 2 weekends.
I think, it's not new news, but the Connacht Championship was actually excellent, and it's obviously not as vast as the Ulster Championship in terms of its depth, but like given Mayo and everybody in Mayo, so chatting to a lot of them last week at the Kerry game, everybody's trying to talk up this Galway side. And I'm not actually sure it is Yerism. I actually think that they genuinely believe that this Galway team are on the comeback, and we kind of forget how good they were right before COVID, and that had a strange impact on people. That time off had a strange impact on many, many teams. Maybe Galway were just one of those teams that just had this dip in form that was inexplicable, and they're finally starting to rekindle this early 2020 form. You've got Roscommon in the mix as well. I genuinely think Derry are a very, very good side, and Galway and Roscommon, the table doesn't lie, as they say, may well finish ahead of Derry come the end of this year's league campaign.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. But Derry have made huge strides as well, obviously, under Rory Gallagher. I think they had won 11 games on the bounce between the divisions up until the Roscommon match. They hadn't conceded a goal until yesterday. They'd only conceded 42 points in the league up until yesterday, so maybe it was an off day. And obviously with that game to come next week, they're still in with a good shout. Roscommon are an interesting one because Anthony Cunningham has been there a few years now. They've got a very tried and trusted method. They have upset the apple cart in terms of Galway, Mayo and Connacht over recent years, probably punched above their weight, and they have kind of yo-yoed between Division 1 and 2. I suppose for them, if they could be consistent enough to stay in Division 1 like Kildare look like they might manage to do now this year, if they can stay up, would be the goal for Roscommon. But they will fancy their chances in Connacht again. They're on the opposite side of the draw to Mayo and Galway, so they can build up for that. But it is a good competition. Mayo, they didn't really field a strong team, did they, against Tyrone on Saturday? It's a funny one. How important is a league final to them? I'm not sure. They'll play Kildare next week, and if they win there, they'll be in the league final more than likely. So it's interesting. I'm not sure. I think they obviously have an eye on the championship as well, and they will be wary of Galway because I think Galway probably haven't got the credit. You know, under Kevin Walsh, they were hugely competitive. They got to a league final against Dublin. They were very, very competitive in Connacht, obviously, where they picked up a couple of titles. I know they lost once or twice unexpectedly, but they certainly had the hex sign over Mayo over those years, which is considering Mayo went so close to All-Irelands in 16 and 17 as well. But now they obviously have the attacking talent, like they won yesterday without Shane Walsh. Robert Finnerty is a really good forward. Paul Conroy around the middle is just a Rolls Royce of a player in terms of delivering ball in. Damien Comer looked fresh yesterday, although I think he was taken off with a bit of a hamstring scare. But they have a lot of depth. Tom O'Callaghan came on and got a goal. Desi Keneally from Moycullen got a goal as well. You know, the Kellys are playing really well from Moycullen as well. So all in all, they look very, very strong. Very, very strong. And with the attacking talent they have, you'd like to think that they'll be in the mix at least if they can keep it in Connacht and then beyond that as well.
April 24th is that match-up between Mayo and Galway. It's going to be the first early date in your calendar from a football perspective this summer. Anyway, so what are we leading off with this morning?
Well, we'll start with the FA Cup action yesterday. Liverpool and Manchester City set to meet in the semi-final. City were 4-1 winners over Southampton. Liverpool advanced courtesy of a 1-0 win over Nottingham Forest. On the other side of the draw, Crystal Palace will meet Chelsea. Palace hammered Everton yesterday by 4-0. There was Premier League action as well. Tottenham within 3 points of fourth place. Arsenal now in the Premier League. They were 3-1 winners against fellow European hopefuls West Ham yesterday, so a useful result for them. Leicester were 2-1 winners over Brentford in the day's other game. In El Clasico last night, Barcelona beat Real Madrid by 4-0. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang scoring twice there for the winners against the La Liga leaders, but Madrid still have a 9-point advantage at the top. Barca now in third. A great night last night, as we were chatting with Alan about, for the Irish under-20s Six Nations Grand Slam winners. They hammered Scotland by 59 points to 5. 9 tries in that win at Musgrave Park in Cork. It's Ireland's third ever Grand Slam after previous successes in 2007 and 2019. We've mentioned Gaelic games. We'll start with hurling. The joint defending champions Kilkenny remain on course to retain their Allianz Hurling League Division 1 title. They beat Waterford yesterday by 221 to 21 points. They'll play Cork in the semi-finals. Cork lost yesterday to Wexford by 122 to 117. Wexford remain unbeaten, and they will play Waterford on the other side of the semi-final draw. Elsewhere, All-Ireland champions Limerick beat Offaly, Dublin beat Laois, Tipperary had a comfortable win over Antrim, and Galway were 25 points to 120 winners over Clare. In the football, Dublin boosted their survival prospects in Division 1. They beat Donegal by 215 to 211. Kildare 24 points to 112 winners over Monaghan. Kerry beat Armagh by 113 to 13 points in the other Division 1 action yesterday. And finally, some golf news to finish. Shane Lowry with another solid finish on the PGA Tour last night. He finished in a tie for 12th at the Valspar Championship. A closing round of 3 under par 68, helping him finish on a 11 under par in Florida. That was 6 shots off 2 players, Sam Burns and Davis Riley. Burns won the title courtesy of a birdie at the second playoff hole.
Cathal Milani, great stuff. Chat to you soon.
Thanks all.
It is 8:44. You're with us here on OTB AM. Get ready to cheer Ireland on in the TikTok Women's Six Nations. To launch this year's campaign, we are giving away 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Wales on Saturday the 26th of March at 4:45 at the RDS. The lucky winners will also be entered into a draw to be in with a chance to win an overnight stay in the stunning Intercontinental Hotel on the night of the game. To enter this competition, just tell us what you think the score will be this weekend between Ireland and Wales. Wherever you're watching this morning on OTB AM, you can comment on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube. International Women's Rugby is at the RDS and there's nothing like it. Be part of the action. Get your tickets at ticketmaster.ie. Anthony Moyles is with us to look back on the weekend's football. Anthony, how are you getting on?
Morning, Eoin. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. We might start with that Croke Park event yesterday between Dublin and Donegal. I think we all probably wanted just a couple of games to see if the Dubs are getting back to their best. They got another win at least. What's impressing you most about the direction of them over the last 2 games from Dublin?
Well, I mean, we've spoken about this. I think they're starting to gel. Obviously, players coming back, which has massively helped. Yeah, but I think look, you know, the addition of a couple of fellas such as McCarthy, you know, he's a massive bonus for them because he gives them options then around the middle. It means you can push Howard into the half forward line. But apart from even the guys coming back, and we know obviously O'Callaghan has to come back, Costello came back in recently, Merchant come back in, Robbie McDade came back in. They've still obviously got a few more to come in, including Paddy Small and O'Callaghan. But I think their level of work rate has increased massively on. You know, so last week, if you watch, you know, if you keep an eye on Dean Rock bust the gut, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 times chasing fellas back to the halfway line and beyond. You know, Dean wouldn't be known for that. Still works very hard, but he's a guy who obviously stays close to goal because that's where he's the most dangerous. But he turned fellas over last week. And even in the game yesterday, added again, and Costello did the same. And I think at around the 62nd or the 63rd minute, he chased a Donegal man back. He got an interception. It went to another Dublin man. I think it went to, I can't remember who it went to, but anyway, they attacked down the bit and it finished with Fenton kicking the score off his left. Stuff that you want to see as a manager and that you're able to take out on a video session and say, that's the kind of stuff we need. That's the kind of stuff that unseen work and how it then, you know, ends up in a score for the team. So, you know, I think they have managed to get that, and you know, they seem to be playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder now. They seem to be kind of getting stuck in. As I said, really, from an effort point of view and from an intensity point of view, they have upped it massively since the first 2 or 3 league games. You know, chasing back, chasing lost causes, running with, you know, support players, running really. Like, I mean, I tell you where there's a big difference. You watch Scully, I think he must have got a massive kick up the rear end, because the first couple of games I felt that he was very passive, you know, kind of quarterbacking the game, but not really doing anything majorly positive, going quite lateral when he got the ball, slowing things down a bit. But the difference in him in the last 2 weeks has been immense. Every single time he gets the ball, he injects pace. Every single time he goes at a player, he draws men in. You know, if you watch his goal, watch where he starts on the goal yesterday. He's essentially, you know, way behind midfield, and Eoin Bon Gallagher is marking him, loses him completely as the 2 of them drift in, and he just continues his run. He actually gives the initial pass and then follows it in and gets on the end of it. So he, you know, like others in the setup, are playing with a lot more intensity and a lot more, I suppose, ambition as well.
It seems to me as well as if they've stumbled upon a full backline that they can really trust for the duration of the season, in Fitzsimons, Byrne and Cian Murphy, because that was definitely an area that was getting exposed time after time in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and they've also got competition there, remember, you know. I thought Byrne had a very tricky first couple of weeks. Like, if you remember, he obviously marked O'Neill for Armagh, and he got a bit of a third time running O'Neill. I thought Fitzsimons got his fill of it yesterday. Obviously, Paddy McBurty put on a bit of a lesson, you know, 1-5 from play. and he was pretty much, very, very difficult to mark. But we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, they're very solid there. But of course, it's being helped now by the fact that their half-back line in front of them is a bit more solid. I think when Howard was at 6, he got dragged out too much on. He didn't know where exactly he was, and he was leaving a few gaping holes in that area of the pitch where teams could exploit. They're in a situation now where they're a bit more solid there. Like, they didn't have John Small yesterday, but John will obviously come back in and solidify there as well. So, it's one of those things. They're managing. What I thought was interesting with even what Farrell has done is he has kept the competition, even within those couple of players, the new lads coming in. So I can't remember the lad's name. Apologies, the cornerback who started the first couple of games. You might know it.
Lee Gannon.
Correct, Lee Gannon. I thought he was an absolute find for them, and I was surprised to see him on the subs bench last week, and then surprised to see it again. And I was thinking to myself, well, is he injured? Has he done enough? But if it is a smart move by the management team, they're keeping him really on his toes, because Murphy comes in, does a fine job last week, very, very capable fella on the ball. You see him coming up the field yesterday in the second half. He puts a lovely little dink pass into Dean Rock, who kicks one over his shoulder. A sticky kind of tight cornerback, nothing too flash, just doing his job, and obviously getting plenty of experience there. So they're all of a sudden starting to blood new guys and fellas who you would say, these guys can get a championship start. So look, as we said a couple of weeks ago, they haven't gone away, and there's absolutely certainly no doubt about it. O'Callaghan would like to be getting back in now. I think it's getting too close. I believe he got re-injured, which wasn't a great sign, but you'd certainly want to get him back in, because look, they're not going to have a full complement. They're going to be without one or two. But if you have Costello, you have Dean Rock, you've Howard, you've Scully, you've Kilkenny, and then you've got a couple of others, others floating in and around. Like Bugler, I thought was really, really good actually in the first 3 or 4 games, and he's kind of drifted back a little bit, I thought, in the last 2 games. He was one of the guys who was kind of really, holding it together in the first couple of games, and he's kind of drifted off. He was okay yesterday. He wasn't brilliant. But look, it's as we said before, the strength and depth now is starting to come, and once they bring these other guys back in, well, they're going to be thereabouts again.
Right, that's very interesting. I'm interested as well in your Donegal take, because it definitely felt to me a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure Donegal people would have disagreed with me, that the win against Tyrone almost came against a run of play, that without Michael Murphy they were really struggling, and that they needed to get Murphy back ASAP. Now, in fairness, Murphy is back now, and obviously played very well yesterday, but the other parts around him seem to be clicking into gear as well. Like, I didn't see the full game yesterday, but is that exactly what you would have seen yesterday?
Well, I tell you, I was dreading watching it yesterday because, to be honest with you, it's been like watching paint dry, watching Donegal the last couple of weeks. But they completely turned everything on their head. Right from the get-go, you literally saw it. It was amazing. I think they won the throw-up, but literally there was a kind of a moment in the game, literally in the first minute or so, where I can't remember who got the ball. One of the defenders gets the ball, and he initially looks to turn around to go backwards, and then he kind of remembers, oh, actually, we're not doing that today. And he goes forward with the ball. And it was kind of like, you could see the realization that everyone was like, no, we're actually going to go forward with the ball today. Now, you know what? They lost the game. They were a little bit open at the back. But they tried things on. They took those risks that we were talking about. For the first time in a long time, they were kicking balls into the full forward line, whether it was Murphy in there, McBurty, whether it was young Pater Mogan kicking them in. Young O'Donnell, I thought, was very impressive in full forward. He had a very good game, good young lad. So they were trying things. They were running off the shoulder. They weren't going lateral, side to side. Now, it exposed them a little bit at the back, and ultimately it cost them. But actually, I think they had 12 wides. A lot of them kickable, to be honest with you. And then the first goal, the Scully goal, was a really bad turnover, a ball up the sideline. It bounced over one of the Donegal lads' heads, and they didn't get back quickly enough. And then the penalty was a bit rash. It probably could have been easy. Now, Dublin could have had 1 or 2 other goals. So I'm not saying Donegal should have won the game, but it was a breath of fresh air to see them play like that on. It really was. And I think I'm kind of a little bit amazed that Bonner has waited this long, because I would have felt that he needs to find that balance between, 15 behind the ball, lateral, slow build-up, running at angles, and then this thing that they can do. Like, watch the goal that Murphy gets. It's a planned move. It's absolutely executed to the T. It's unbelievably done, and they have that ability. And when they're getting the ball into McBurty fast and early, and Murphy, it's still a massive, massive threat.
It definitely feels as if we've kind of written Donegal off subconsciously, as if, they've had their chance, is the sort of tone I kind of feel sometimes around Donegal, and certainly maybe what I would think as well. And it does feel that they're just still there. They're still around. It's just hard to see how they actually get to that next level, where if they're in an Ulster final, for example, against a team like Tyrone, that they actually do see that game out, or that they do see out a big All-Ireland quarter-final, if that was the situation that they ever found themselves in. Like, how did they manage to close that gap, given that you started to see new things from them yesterday?
Yeah, well, the first thing is they need to keep Murphy fit, and they need to keep McBurty fit. And I know that's a very, very obvious thing to say, but they are just so talismanic. Like, I mean, they are titans for the team. As I said, McBurty, 1-5 from play yesterday off Mick Fitzsimons, and Mick has been shutting fellas down for the last number of weeks in an unbelievable fashion. But he was at 6s and 7s yesterday. McBurty could have probably had 1-8. 1-9 even. He kicked a couple of wides that you probably would have said, yeah, they were well within his range. Murphy is, again, he can float around. He's out there as a midfield option, but he's also out there as a kind of a third midfielder, whereby Dublin were going long a lot. Michael Shield was in goal yesterday, and he's a very, very good goalkeeper. But when he's kicking out to his right, he kind of shifts his body around, and it's quite an obvious kick. And Murphy was actually standing out to his right a lot as a deterrent, and he was forcing him to kick across his body out to his left. And Donegal are obviously quite big around the middle. Now, they have a couple of fellas to come back in there too, which will help. And I think could they win an Ulster, and could they? If they keep those lads fit. I would have said after last week, I said if they continue to play the way they're playing, they're going to get picked off. They'll get picked off in an 11-9 or 110-9 type of a game, and they just lose by a couple of scores, because they'll keep it tight, but they won't kick much to far end. But actually, yesterday gave me an awful lot of hope for them, and actually say, they can mix it, and they can play plenty of football still. And if guys capable in that forward line of picking up the mantle and just picking up the extra little bits around Murphy and McBurty, they don't have to stand out. They just have to chip in. Like O'Donnell chipped in with 2 scores yesterday. They have to chip in around that, get 2 here, 1 there. And then the transition of keeping it tight at the back, that's something that he's going to have to find. But he probably has 4 or 5, 6 weeks to find it. So could they do it? I wouldn't fancy them, as in, I wouldn't fancy necessarily playing them if they're playing in the same vein that they were playing yesterday.
Right, very encouraging stuff. So from Donegal, if we're not just looking at the score. If you rewind then to Saturday night then, Mayo against Tyrone, is it leaving Mayo off the hook completely to say, listen, they're safe, they don't care about the league final, they're playing Galway a few weeks after the league final, they probably don't even want to qualify for it? Or are you seeing a few deeper issues from Mayo on Saturday?
Yeah, 6-1, I think.
Right.
6-1. I think they were, the first 20 minutes, I think they were still on the bus, to be honest. They were absolutely asleep. They hardly laid a finger on Tyrone. It was really, really casual, shockingly casual. And, it's funny, you talked about the Donegal, Tyrone thing. It's kind of going, Tyrone are really, we'll talk about them in a minute, right? But they're struggling to find themselves. And they're really struggling. You can see it. There's certain players that have just not hit the heights of anything like last year. And they seem to have some kind of an identity crisis. I don't know what's going on at the moment. But Mayo let them off the hook completely in that first 20-25 minutes. It was 5 or 6 points to nothing. Mayo hardly, as I said, raised a gallop at all. Tyrone should have been further out the gate. And then it was kind of like Mayo got a little bit annoyed. Tyrone hit them a couple of times, and there was a few little, kind of off the ball incidents going on. And Mayo kind of said, you know what, actually, let's kind of kick it off here. And next thing, then they started to kind of wind it down. They started to get that power running game coming from midfield with Eoin and Jordan. They started to get their half-backs into it. Keegan started coming up the field a bit more. But my major worry, and this has been there for a long time, is their forward prowess and the ability that they have up front. They're still very reliant on that running power from midfield. Their backs getting on the ball, clipping over a few scores. Eoin especially, very, very reliant on him getting up the field and punching holes and either scoring himself or laying the ball off for a forward to kick on a handy point. But, you know, O'Donoghue is well capable, and I was saying last week, I was mightily impressed with him winning his own ball, taking on his man and kicking scores. He didn't do it as much on Saturday, but he was still probably one of the only major threats. Jason Doherty was very quiet, was well marshalled. Orm, you know, it's just not working for him. He's trying hard, but he's just not that killer instinct inside. Young Boland was okay last week, was only okay again. You know, they need O'Connor back. They need 2 O'Connors back, but they certainly need Dermot O'Connor back, and they need him like he was in Croke Park and not last week, where he was a little bit quiet too. So they're struggling up front. I don't think they've scored a goal, or maybe they've only got 1 in the league. So they're you know, they're not kicking big scores. No, they're not giving away much at the far end, but they're not kicking big scores. And you know, I think they potentially will meet. Obviously, they'll come up against Galway, and Galway are known obviously for rattling on big scores if you allow them. But Galway have been pretty mean at the back too recently. So you know, you kind of look at it and you say he's done a great job, Horan, because he's mixed his team every week, and he's changed young lads in, and he's kind of changed around different positions. And I think he obviously will settle eventually on a very, very strong team. But I'm still worried in the last 4 of an All-Ireland series, have they got the forward ability to, you know, to kick 114, 115? And I just don't see it at the moment.
So Mayo were disappointing on Saturday. I guess you said it there yourself. They were on the bus for the first 20 minutes, and Tyrone still only, I guess, scraped past them on the scoreboard at least. So would your concerns for Tyrone actually be greater than Mayo after Saturday night?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed. Petey Hart was unbelievable, absolutely phenomenal. He kind of played kind of centre forward, full forward sometimes in the first half. Won ball, kick scores, brought men into it, really led the line well. They had a strong breeze. Myler chipped in with a few nice scores. Canavan again was a threat. McShane I thought was quiet. McKernan has gone, unfortunately, way back. I don't know if the player of the year is weighing around his neck, but it was just like, I mean, the guy just doesn't seem to. Sorry?
McGeary,
sorry. Yeah, I just, you know, it's just not happening, and he's trying hard, but it's just not happening. And the more he tries, it's kind of like it's slipping away from me. He's taking a couple of shots off the outside of his right, and it just skewed up in the air. But for me, they seem like a team that are, I don't know, it's not tiredness on. I don't know what it is. It's hard to put my finger on it. Like, I mean, they're trying, you can see them, but it's just not necessarily clicking for them. Like, I mean, post that first 20 minutes, like Mayo won the game essentially, and you know, if Mayo had anything about them in the first 20 minutes, you would have said actually they could probably take this, because Tyrone were lackluster in the second half. I just don't think they're being as adventurous as they were. They are quite, you know, they like to contain the game, they like to control the game. But again, as we alluded to last week, I think the era of that is kind of slowly kind of moving on. Risk has to be taken and chances have to be taken, and kind of, you know, fellas with the ability to go and do things that you don't expect has to happen. And you're just slightly worried for them, honestly, because they're not in a really, really great place at the moment. You know, they really aren't. And, you know, coming into the last day, obviously they play Kerry. Like, I mean, that's not a great time to be meeting Kerry, to be honest with you, especially if Kerry decide to go full hog. Now, they may not, right? Kerry might decide to, well, we'll rest about 3 or 4 players, and that may play into Tyrone's hand. But if Kerry decided, you know what, we want to set a marker down here, unlike Mayo, well then, you know, Tyrone could be in bad old shape coming into that Ulster Championship.
The relegation picture is absolutely fascinating as we look at next week. You've got Kildare, Donegal and Tyrone all on 5 points. Dublin and Monaghan currently occupying the relegation spaces on 4 points. As you mentioned there, it's Kerry against Tyrone. Donegal are hosting Armagh in Letterkenny. I think they should try and move that game to Ballybofey. They've got a poor record in Letterkenny, don't they? They had a fantastic record in Ballybofey. Mayo are at home to Kildare. Well, at home in inverted commas to Kildare, obviously. And Monaghan against Dublin in Clones. That Mayo-Kildare game is in Carrick and Shannon, actually, I think. So those are the fixtures for next week. How are you calling it at this moment? Who's going down?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start with my banker, which is probably completely wrong. But I think Dublin will take Monaghan. Monaghan were very poor yesterday. Extremely poor. And it wasn't even the fact that Kildare were great. Monaghan were just so lackluster, it was unbelievable. Standing off Kildare men, letting them basically do whatever they wanted to do with the ball. Monaghan would usually be very tight at the back, fellas throwing their bodies in, you know, preventing shots. Where it was, you know, Kildare were just one ball in, a fella sidestepping, hand pass off, bang, over the bar. Loads of Monaghan guys in the vicinity, but no one really putting any major pressure on the ball or putting their body on their line or tackling or communication. I thought they looked like they had done an unbelievable week's work, which they probably didn't do, but they looked very leggy, very, very tired. You know, devoid of ideas, as I said, and really devoid of any major, you know, get up and go. So that's a big score. 24 points is a big score to concede. Like that's a hammering. You know, I don't care what anyone says, because that could have easily been 30. Do you know what I mean? So I wouldn't be. Dublin are coming, and Dublin are coming with the possibility of remaining in Division 1. And from a couple of weeks ago where they had 0 points, they could finish with 6. And they won't want their momentum to be broken with this game. So they're coming up and they're coming in with all guns blazing. You would imagine that they're saying, right, this is another marker we're going to set down. So I'd fear for Monaghan. I think, you know, Donegal Armagh is going to be a tricky one, because McGeaney will want to bounce back from the Kerry game. He's probably seeing his momentum curve starting to kind of wane off, and he will most definitely want to kind of resurrect that. And that's always a humdinger of a game. You know, it's always a humdinger of a game. And I think Donegal will be interesting. Will they just revert back to type and say, okay, we're locking it down and we're going to shut down the forwards, we're going to shut down O'Neill, we're going to make it a real dog of a fight, and we'll try to pick them off at the far end? Or are they a bit more adventurous? I think they need to be adventurous, because the one area for Armagh that I worry about is their full back line, and is actually ball in, especially high ball in. So I wouldn't be surprised if Murphy gets in full forward a lot against Armagh, and they try to put those diagonal balls into him and McBurty. So that's going to be a fascinating game. And you know, if, as I said, we're kind of bigging up Donegal a bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if they revert back to type. I'd worry for them. If they can marry it, I think they'll be okay. So, you know, you're back to Mayo Kildare, and Jesus, Kildare for me looked like a team who were playing with a smile on their face. You know, there seems to be a brilliant atmosphere around Kildare, around Newbridge. You know, you see what Glenn Ryan is doing and the rest of the management team. There's a happiness about it. You know, you'd love to be part of a lot of setups. You'd be saying to yourself, Jesus, you know, I'd love to be part of that setup, because there's guys, as I say, playing with a smile on their face. They seem to be enjoying themselves. They seem to have a common purpose. The management team have them going in the right areas, and they're believing in themselves on. And I tell you, they're you know, they've been thereabouts through the whole league. They've really represented themselves well. And will Mayo decide, you know what, we might play 3 or 4 new lads again, and we'll taper it off a little bit coming into the Galway game? Will they take their chances that they end up in a league final anyway? You know, will they be really that annoyed if they don't make the league final? I don't think he will be. I think Horan has an idea of where he wants to go, and he knows Galway are sitting there waiting in the wings, and he knows he wants to get ready for that one. So So what have I answered? Probably nothing. I think Monaghan get relegated, but I couldn't pin on the second one. I really couldn't.
Yeah. The real plus for Kildare as well is that the magnitude of their win yesterday means they're the only team in the bottom 5 who have a positive scoring difference. So if there's more than 2 teams tied, obviously it'll come down to that, which is a very live possibility. It's going to be a great day's football, that is certainly for sure. Monaghan and A another is what we're concluding this morning.
Yes.
Go down to Division 2 next year. Anthony Moyles, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million.
No bother, Eoin. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Anthony Moyles there looking back on yesterday's football action. It is 9:09 here on Monday morning. Here's what you've got on OTB Sports Radio today. We've got OTB Gold, Brian O'Driscoll in conversation with Ethan Asewa from 1 o'clock. State of the Union, more rugby for you from 3 o'clock. World Cup Revisited on Spain 82 from 4 o'clock. And OTB Gold, Michael Owen's Life After Football is coming up from 6 o'clock. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And Mark Lawrenson is joining us next to talk football. But before that, here is Brian Kerr after our live commentary and off the ball yesterday afternoon of Tottenham's 3-1 win against West Ham.
Brian, it was a really exciting match, it must be said, at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Plenty of goals, but I suppose whatever about the win, putting Tottenham Hotspur really back into that top 4 race, the style of football, the manner of that performance this afternoon will really have the supporters of the club buzzing after that game.
Yeah, I think it was a very good performance all round, apart from the concession of a poor enough set-piece goal. West Ham got very few corners in the game. Spurs didn't deal with, but they're a good attacking side. That they use their set piece as well, the good delivery. But apart from that, and a couple of other little moments, Yarmolenko had a bit of a chance in the second half. And he got in the inside on the left side. Mikel Antonio in the first half got in off a bad pass back from Harry Kane towards Dwyer that was short, and he put it wide. Other than that, Spurs were in I would say, nearly total control. The passing at half time was quite even, the numbers, which surprised me. I thought Spurs had a lot more passes, but in the second half they were dominant in the game, and I felt that they might get caught through coughing up, through not taking their opportunities. They got a lot of chances to finish it off and get 2-goal lead, and it took until the 88th minute for to get that. But I thought they well deserved the 3rd goal. Good football, played well, and particularly impressive from the midfield up into the attacking positions. And a bit of hope there, I think, for Spurs fans.
Yeah, and I suppose the interesting thing is that, you could look at this. We could talk all day about their strikers. We know they've got brilliant goal scorers. That's never been a problem for Tottenham Hotspur. It was always what was going on behind them. And as we mentioned in the game, we've been talking about it since. They've made some really good signings there. Kulievski to back up the 2 lads up front. They got Bentancur in the middle, and then Romero then playing in that centre-back trio. So the team seems to be coming together. Now, is that kind of enough to take Tottenham, do you think, into the top 4 places? Of course, they got a really tough challenge against Arsenal, who are also going for it, and Manchester United as well. We've seen from Arsenal, they've got a bit of character and guts in that team now as well.
Well, with the performance today, they showed that they're capable of winning all the games they have left. One of those games against Liverpool away, I think, and but the way they played against Manchester City when they won the game 3-2 showed that they can do it against the best of teams. But the lack of consistency would also suggest to you that, the next couple of games, Newcastle, who knows? They played as well as they did today. They should beat Newcastle and Aston Villa next match. Then I think they've got Brentford, and they've got a lot of matches against teams that you'd say, yeah, Burnley. Some of them are scrapping near the bottom. But they have the quality, but it's just whether they can produce the consistency of performance to do it. I don't think they'll catch Arsenal. I think they'll need to get something, do something exceptional to catch Arsenal, and I don't think they're capable of that. I don't think they've had the consistency that Arsenal seem to be finding, apart from losing the match with Liverpool when they played very well during the week. They have seemed to have got themselves together and have found a pattern of play that works for them. And Spurs are just getting there, but they're still not anywhere near near consistent enough, and you've only to look back a couple of weeks to find those results. They lost to Middlesbrough in the Cup, lost to Burnley in the league, lost to Southampton. You know, let's say they're really an up and down team, but they seem to be finding a bit of form. But I think it's going to be too late to have a major impact on this season.
Just as you mentioned, Arsenal there, that game against Aston Villa yesterday, very impressive performance, grinding out a 1-0 win after being beaten by Liverpool after a superb first half performance in that particular game. And it is just noticeable. I remember doing their first match of the season against Chelsea, went 2-0 down. They could have really capitulated in that match, but they fought hard to make sure they didn't lose by a big margin. They did get hammered by City a couple of weeks later, but they've showed some great character, great determination, something that's been lacking in an Arsenal team for a long, long time, you'd have to say, Brian. And that must be impressing you as well.
Yeah, I think that the manager has finally started to make headway. He's made some big decisions. Obviously, the Aubameyang one, I thought that needed to be made for a good while. I remember going back to their performances in the Europa League last year, which were very mixed. But I thought Aubameyang as the captain was a bit of a disaster in those games. Didn't set the tone for the rest of the team with a proper work rate and real any sort of aggression or intent or passion, I thought. So, you know, I think that has worked out to be a good move. They seem to have got the centre-back situation sorted out. Tierney has always been playing well in the full-back position anyway. Suarez has gone in at the right-back position now. The Japanese lad is out injured. And the goalkeeper's had a very good season, even if he let in a soft goal against Liverpool. Maybe the first goal was the goal on the near post. Yeah, it was. But other than that, he's been exceptionally good. And, you know, I wondered when they signed him, I said, has he been that good at Sheffield United that you're saying he'd be good enough for Arsenal? But he's proved to be the case. He's probably the best English goalkeeper available at the moment. I think he's in better form than Pickford. But you know, the youth in their team and the system, Partey has found his way. Granit Xhaka is playing slightly different, more advanced on the left side of the train in midfield. Odegaard, young Xhaka obviously scored a goal yesterday. He's been really, really good. And Martinelli on the other side, Lacazette, a different position, playing off, drop deep, false nine, whatever you want to call it. But it seems to be working for them very efficiently. They look fresh and they're in good shape and in good form, and they look the most likely to make that top 4 position for me.
Just to finish then on the team that lost today, Brian, West Ham United. You know, I know you were saying that David Moyes, you know, he will be going for both competitions, the Premier League and the Europa League. He won't be trying to pull back, but the squad is being stretched now with those injuries. It could get worse from, he doesn't really have a deep squad as it is. And, you know, the Europa League, you throw, I know people are suggesting that you throw his lot in with that competition, but, you know, the draw hasn't really worked out too well for them. Lyon, you'd expect them maybe to beat a team that's struggling in Ligue 1 in France, but then they come up against either Eintracht Frankfurt or Barcelona. A lot of people favouring Barcelona in that tie because of their resurgence under Xavi, and that would be a massive challenge for West Ham if they were to get to a semi-final.
Yeah, well, look, they're in it. They're delighted to be in it. The passion was in the stadium, transferred to the team. On Thursday night, I covered the game. West Ham played very well, and I was delighted for them. I was delighted for David Moyles. He's had his tough times as a manager going back over the last number of years. He was out of work for a good while on 2 or 3 occasions. But the other night he enjoyed it, and he's certainly done a real job at West Ham. So I wouldn't underestimate their ability to beat Lyon. And if they beat Lyon, I think it's possible they could beat Barcelona. Aren't by any means the real deal. They have they've improved. Aubameyang has gone there from Arsenal. He scored a few goals. Of the young players in the middle of the field, Pedri and Gavi, these players really, really clever players. But they're still vulnerable defensively. Busquets still holding the middle of the field. I think West Ham have a chance. They're a team. They're a top 6, top 7 team in the Premier League at the moment. Barcelona are back in the top 4 in Spain, but they've had a very, very mixed season, to say the least. And while they look like they're improving, Look, let's wait and see. But it's a good position for West Ham to be in. I think it's going to be difficult for them. I don't think they're going to make the top 4, and whether they be content to keep in the top 6 or 7, so be it. They've got a tough enough programme left in terms of the Premier League. There's some difficult matches. The Everton match was a vital match for Everton before they play Lyon. But I think anything is possible for West Ham in this competition.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
Still feel as if Everton will have enough to get out of it. Like I said, more of a gut feeling when it comes to Everton. Yeah, it'll be fascinating. There'll be more twists and turns between now and the end of the season. It's great we're still talking about a battle for the title, a battle for 4th place, and of course those 5 teams who it looks like now battling for those 2 remaining places which will keep them in the Premier League.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 9:20. You're very welcome back. Mark Lawrenson is standing by, but before that, just to tell you about our competition. Get ready to cheer Ireland on in the TikTok Women's Six Nations. To launch this year's campaign, we are giving away 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Wales on Saturday, the 26th of March at 4:45 at the RDS Arena. The lucky winners will also be entered into a draw to be in with a chance to win an overnight stay in the stunning Intercontinental Hotel on the night of the game. To enter this competition, tell us what you think the score will be this weekend between Ireland and Wales. Whatever you're watching this morning on OTB AM, you can comment on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube. International Women's Rugby is at the RDS and there is nothing like it. Be part of the action. Get your tickets at ticketmaster.ie. Mark Lawrenson, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Plenty to get stuck into over the course of the weekend's talking points. We might actually start with Everton. The hammering they took at the hands of Crystal Palace yesterday isn't going to impact them one bit in their fight for survival. That is the main thing they care about. Obviously, they don't care too much about the cup. But you look at Frank Lampard's comments after the game yesterday, and I mean, he's saying that there's only so much you can do to try to butter somebody up to get their confidence. You're playing at the cutthroat end of football, he said. This is the FA Cup quarter-finals. If you haven't got the confidence to play, you can flip it and say, have you got the bollocks to play? Apologies, but that's the football term. Is he right to be questioning the cojones of his players?
Yeah, for some of them, absolutely. But you know what? I mean, I watched the whole game, and after 25 minutes, if you'd said to me, Palace are going to win this 4-0, honestly, there was no chance. They were really competitive, Everton, and they started off a really high level as well, tackles flying in, etc. And you kind of thought, wow, you know, the win they got obviously against Newcastle has done them all sorts of good. But back to their old failings, basically. As soon as Crystal Palace started to get hold of the ball, started to use the width and the pace defensively, they're all over the place, Everton. They look very, very ordinary. And it was almost at one stage as though they were expecting for Palace to score and run away with it. And that's his problem. There's not a lot else he can do. He keeps changing the team around. He keeps changing the system. But I don't, honestly, even at the end of the match at a 4-0, and it looks awful as well, I kind of thought, well, you know what? He's got enough players there who've given it a right go. There's just one or two of them who can't really play the way he wants to play, which is in the face or in your face football in terms of the opposition.
Are the problems in terms of the playing personnel at Everton a lot worse than maybe Frank Lampard actually expected? Because what you're saying there is a team that just isn't good enough to compete with Crystal Palace.
Yeah. Well, listen, by the way, don't underestimate Crystal Palace.
Of course.
Vieira's done a fab job. Some of the players he's got, the boy at the back who's just gone in the England squad, is it Gray?
Yeah.
And that's his name. There's Gallagher. I mean, you see Gallagher playing yesterday as always like the World Cup final. Eze, Alisi, obviously Zaha. They're a really, really good side and a really nice team to watch as well. And very much, you know, as people would say nowadays, on the front foot. But I think you look at Holgate and those all the players he's got at the back. Frank Lampard, he must have thought they may be just having a bad time. They've all got a mistake in them. The goalkeeper's got a mistake on them, make mistake in him. I mean, they changed him the other day, didn't they? But then he's come back in. So he probably looks at his squad now and thinks, crikey. So if they finish fourth bottom, he'll be delighted.
Yeah, it's a massive summer rebuild then.
Listen, they've already spent $500 million.
Yeah.
I mean, look, as a boy with it every week, I'm on recruitment. I mean, they've had so many different people in charge of head of recruitment. The owner's had his say in it and everything. And I know from the lads who live near me who work for the football club, just say, well, in all honesty, you speak to the owner about football and he knows very, very little. But it's a classic case of obviously it's his little baby, and obviously he wants to dress it up whichever way he wants to do. I think, as well, if you really look at it, the new stadium, the building of that, which is ongoing, that must be in doubt because I'm not even sure where they're going to get the money from. So, yeah, recruitment-wise, it's an absolute massive summer for them if they stay up, but it's a big if at the moment.
Let's flip over to the other side of Liverpool and Liverpool FC, who had a good win yesterday. I don't think anybody was expecting this to be too easy for them, especially going to Nottingham Forest and some of the scalps that they've taken this year in the FA Cup. And Klopp still manages to make a couple of changes. They have the lion's share of the ball, maybe not a whole pile of chances this time, and they get the job done. I think that's kind of the ideal situation for him going into the international break. Yeah,
well, that's what he's done, in the last... It might be 5 or 6 games. Keep making these changes. I think Milan away. I certainly remember West Ham at home. Arsenal as well. And that's because he has everybody virtually everybody's fit. There's just 1 or 2 little knocks hanging around, apart from Trent Alexander-Arnold now, of course. And he can almost pick 2 teams. And what he has done, of course, with making the changes, fresh legs, but star players, top players are coming on to play. You saw that yesterday with Thiago and Henderson, etc. So it's good for them. And just going back to everything, I don't want Everton to go down. I think it's a big thing having the Mersey derby of both teams in the Premier League. But Liverpool rode the luck. I mean, the boy should have scored. I can't pronounce his name, but he should have scored. It was a fabulous chance just before Liverpool scored, and Liverpool would have gone out, but the ball's running for them as well a little bit, but they were impressive. Nottingham Forest, I mean, the 3 boys on loan, I think it's Johnson, Spence and the other one, Garner, they look good players. They'll all go back to the parent clubs and get sold in the summer to the teams in the Premier League, but Liverpool have just got to keep going. All he'll be doing now, Jurgen, will be he'll be waiting for the phone to ring or a text to go, and I've done my hamstring playing for Colombia against whoever, and all those kind of things. So he'll probably get away on holiday, but he'll have his phone on. Don't worry about that.
That's for sure. It's very much nitpicking when it comes to trying to find any issues in the Liverpool squad. One of those things might have been your backup fullbacks at the start of the season. If any of them went down, who would fill in? And Tsimikas obviously started the season and played really well in the field. Okay, well, that's the left side of the defence sorted. The question still remained, what happened if Trent Alexander-Arnold went down? Joe Gomez obviously played there yesterday. That feels like a stopgap rather than a long-term solution.
Well, when he first came into the team under Brendan Rodgers, I think he played left back, if my memory serves me right. So I don't have an issue with him. I think he's a better defender than Trent. He obviously doesn't give you what Trent gives you going forward, but that's not a great issue in Liverpool's team because they've got so many creative players anyway. So no, I don't see that as a great problem. Right. Tsimikas as well. He's 2-footed. He could play right back if you really wanted him to. I think the problem is Konate is learning. And we know he's going to be good and, great physique, etc., quick enough. I just think defensively, if you watched yesterday and you watched West Ham as well, he disappears at times from his position. And, as good as Van Dijk is, he can't put his finger in the dike every time something happens. So it's something that Konate's learning, and they've got Matip anyway there to play out. So it's not a great issue, and he will only get better. But to be beaten on a regular basis just with a ball through the middle is not good, and I'm sure Jurgen knows that. But Canarty's just learning, I'm afraid. But fortunately, yesterday they got away with a couple of issues like that.
Like, I guess the wider point here is about the players that can come in and do a really good job for Liverpool. And despite all the money that Manchester City, if we compare it with them, have spent, it does feel as if they're dependent on a tighter group of players than Liverpool currently are at. And we can't forget it, that they're both fighting on the same amount of fronts at the moment.
Yeah, I think we're probably talking attacking players, aren't we?
Yeah.
In all honesty, because when you look at who Liverpool can bring on, it makes such a difference. The regular front three, Mane and Salah, and whether it's Jota or Firmino, and then you got Luis Diaz as well that comes on. So, look, they're all worthy of a place in the team, and it's great for the manager because the two he leaves out are just warming up for 90 minutes, like right past his face, as in, right, I'm ready to go as soon as you decide. So they're in a great place, aren't they? They're in a very, very good place, unbeaten for a long time. Take away the Inter Milan thing, obviously, which they still got through. So confidence will be sky high, not getting carried away. But as I say, it's now this big, long week for managers, especially like the likes of Klopp, where they're just hoping and praying that nobody comes back with a hamstring or a calf strain or all those, or actually something worse. I think the interesting thing about Trent's injury, just saying he'll be out for weeks, which in Klopp language, that sounds to me like it might be at least a month or so.
Right. You don't think?
I mean, he normally would say to you, if the medical people say 2 weeks, he would go, yeah, well, we should have him back 2 weeks. He'll be training. He's just saying weeks, which normally means more than weeks, as in months. But I hope I'm wrong.
You don't think he's just saying, please don't pick him for the international team?
Oh, well, because he's injured, isn't he? I mean, he probably got injured because flipping Martinelli was twisting and turning him all sorts of different ways in the Arsenal game. But no, I don't know. The other thing about picking him playing for England, he probably wouldn't play anyway. Yeah. So Klopp would probably think, go and do a bit of training and have a rest and get your feet up. Happy days.
If we flip over to the Premier League then, Tottenham Hotspur's form has been really interesting over the last little while. It's gone win-loss for I think 8 games in a row now. It's been a perfect pattern. They beat West Ham United to keep that pattern going yesterday on a 3-1 scoreline. And it feels, granted they haven't managed to put back-to-back wins together, it does feel that there's real momentum at the moment behind the Spurs team, that they are the ones who could really make a charge, and they're the ones who could really knock Arsenal off that 4th spot. Yeah,
we call them Spursy. They sometimes go very Spursy, don't they, and go and get beat like a Burnley away and those kind of places. You just don't really know with them because they are so reliant, obviously, on Kane outstanding again yesterday and Son. So I'm afraid it's a bit watch this space. I mean, they've got some very, very good players, but another 3 or 4 games winning on the trot, and I would say to you, yeah, but Spurs, it's the way that they are. They blow hot and cold, and I thought actually as well, talking about that the chase for 4th, I thought Arsenal would get beat at Villa, but they completely controlled the game, and I thought it was just one of those, especially having gotten beat to Liverpool and going to Villa, who fire at home. They really give you an education, an examination, and I thought they struggled, but they completely controlled the game. And obviously listening to Brian there with what he was saying as well, he's got it right, Arteta. They look a really good side now. So it's just a matter of keep playing and hopefully keep winning. I still think they will be favourites, although I've not really looked at the fixtures for either Tottenham or for Arsenal, so I wouldn't really know who or when they've got to play teams.
Yeah, Arsenal good in the short term, but still have Manchester United. They have Spurs, which will obviously be a massive game, and they have Chelsea left to play as well. So a mixed fixture list for both of them. Just on that Arsenal point, just to finish up, Steven Gerrard was in a bad mood after the game. I think it's fair to say. Bukayo Saka, was tackled by Tyrone Mings during the game. Studs were up. A lot of Arsenal fans thought Mings should have been sent off. Steven Gerrard came out afterwards and says the boys got a man up, basically. Last time I checked, it's a no contact sport. I think tackles are allowed. I think aggression is allowed. I think physicality is allowed. He's a good player, but he can't complain about that side. That's football. And he mentioned the amount of screws that he's got in his hips, Steven Gerrard, and all that. Is he right, Gerrard, or has the game changed?
Oh, it's changed, but he's right. They're both, because you've got to be competitive. I mean, crikey, he's the most competitive player ever at Liverpool, and in training and everything. And I think he probably, as I was thinking, Arsenal come in back of a defeat, get into them early, get a goal. Obviously, I mean, goalkeeper was out, wasn't he? Martinelli was out as well. So you're thinking, we score one here, we might get 2 or 3. And I think he was just disappointed the fact that his players never really had the same idea in terms of when they played, and it was a bit after New Claude. So, the interview was funny because the lad Des Kelly, is a big Liverpool fan, and he's a massive Steven Gerrard fan. I couldn't stop laughing, but he had the hump, which, you know what you're allowed to, and I hope he transferred the hump onto the players, because obviously they're away now, so they won't get the wrath of his tongue probably until they get back ready for the next Premier League game. But that's the way it is, and it's interesting the way they're running Aston Villa, because really the guy, the main coach, he is, I can never remember his name, I'm sorry, but he coaches all the time, and I think Stephen and Macca on the sidelines there. They're watching and obviously saying different stuff, but the coach is left to one man basically for the first team, and it worked for them at Rangers, and I think eventually it will work for them at Villa. If they finish in the top 10, it's a big thing for Villa, and the shouts over here at the moment are that they look favourite to sign Phillips from Leeds for about 60 million in the summer. Well, he'll make your team better, won't he?
Yeah, that's for sure. Does Jurgen Klopp know that Des Kelly is a Liverpool fan? Because that always tends to be the head-to-head.
Probably, yeah, probably. I mean, he wouldn't know it like all of us, because I mean, Des Kelly was around when we were playing, and he went on all our trips to Europe, etc. So, yeah, possibly. I don't know, Klopp. About 2 months ago, I looked at Klopp and thought he looks a bit peed off, but he's completely changed now, and I mean, he's absolutely talking about the world and its life, and you can ask him any question, it would appear at the moment, and he's obviously got a view on it. So, he must be in such, well, he is, because he said the other week that in terms of happy space, he said, look, to have all these players and the quality of these players fit at this stage of the season is massive. I mean, City have got it as well, haven't they? Obviously, they just wish they hadn't, but City have got it as well. See, that was another thing I said. I don't know if you saw any of the City game, but Southampton had a fantastic chance to make it 2 each. Absolutely fantastic chance. Hit it straight at the goalkeeper, and either side of him, it goes to 2-2. And it's amazing in football when things are running for you, they really do run for you.
Yeah, that's for sure. Mark, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
That's all right.
Mark Lawrenson there on the line, looking back on the weekend's Premier League and FA Cup action. You've been with us here on OTB AM, which has been brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We should say congratulations to Will Maxwell. You've won a Gillette Labs shaving kit this morning on OTB AM for your performance ranking shout on our Instagram page. You can join us tomorrow morning, Tuesday's OTB AM from 7:30, where we're talking to Irish hurdler Sarah Lavin, who finished in the World Athletics Finals in Belgrade, and there'll be more rugby and hurling as well. Congratulations as well to Cathal Cole, our daily winner today of the pair of tickets to Ireland-Wales in the TikTok Women's Six Nations this Saturday at the RDS. You're also in the draw for our overnight stay in the Intercontinental Hotel. We'll give you another chance to enter the draw tomorrow morning here on the show. Right now, we're bringing you more reaction to the weekend's sport. Here's Will in conversation with Shane Byrne and Cian Tracy talking rugby.
It's time for us to have a look back at the final day of the Six Nations. A dramatic enough finish as it worked out as well. France landing their first Grand Slam in some 12 years, labouring a little bit in the second half, but did most of the work in the first half in beating England at the Stade de France last night. They are the new champions of the Six Nations some 12 months on after they were denied by Wales on the final day. Wales themselves suffered an embarrassment, beaten by Italy, the Azoris' first victory in the Six Nations in 7 years. 36 games it had been since they had defeated Scotland. But what drama at the end, getting a try late on and sealing that conversion with the last kick of the game as the Italians won by 22 points to 21. And from an Irish perspective, it's a silver medal. It's a triple crown and a first piece of silverware which was lifted as captain by Johnny Sexton. It was after that bonus point win against Scotland. And this is what the Ireland captain had to say about lifting silverware in front of the home fans at the Aviva.
Especially being a little bit older than some of the lads, having my kids there is extra special, and it's a big motivation to do it, and very special to have them there, and they were so excited. All week they were talking about the trophy, and I don't think I've been as nervous for a game for a long time. But look, we got there in the end. Plenty to work on, but very special moment.
Why do you think you were so nervous?
I think
I've played many big games before. Still not got used to it.
Because I think it's because this team means so much to me. Genuine. I wanted us to have something to show for all our hard work over the last 8 weeks. It's an incredible environment, and it was more for the squad. And that was it. I was nervous. I wanted us to play our best. We didn't quite get there, but we played pretty well at times, and we showed, like Faz said, which is the most important thing. We showed guts. We showed everyone in the stadium what it means for us to play for Ireland, and that's the most important thing.
Ireland captain Johnny Sexton in conversation with our own Ash O'Reilly at the post-match press conference after Ireland's victory. A bonus point secured in the end with 2 late tries, big that Conor Murray try, as they won by 26 points to 5 against Scotland at the Aviva Stadium. To look back on that and the tournament in a more general sense, delighted to say we're joined by rugby writer Cian Tracy and also by former Ireland hooker Shane Byrne. Guys, how are you getting on this afternoon?
Very well, and yourself?
Yeah,
hey Will, how are you?
I'm struggling along. I know that Cian has got Musgrave Park in the background there as well, so he's getting ready for potentially a Grand Slam party a little bit later on. It wasn't to be, Cian, with a Grand Slam for Ireland. France went on and got the victory against Ireland in Paris and completed the job last night, impressively enough, against England. But from an Irish perspective, despite some of the patchy parts of some of the performances, Andy Farrell would point out after the game that once they had lost in Paris, they had to kind of park the championship being in their own hands. They still finished by hook or by crook with 3 bonus point victories after that against Italy, England and Scotland. That's not a bad tournament overall.
No, it's not. And, you're right in what you said. They did bounce back well from the defeat in Paris, but they also got a bonus point against Wales. So they actually got all 4 of their wins were bonus point wins, which is really impressive. They scored more tries than anyone in the tournament. They conceded fewer tries than anyone in the tournament. So there was plenty of positives to take. I think Johnny Sexton sort of summed it up well, and to be fair, I think he's been really measured throughout the tournament alongside Andy Farrell. Like, no one was really ever getting ahead of themselves, and to be honest, I don't know, you could argue against Wales that they got an 80-minute performance, but you see what happened Wales yesterday, and that perhaps said more about Wales than it did against Ireland. But in the following games, I don't know if we saw a full, complete 80-minute performance from Ireland. You think back to Paris, and they left themselves with a lot of work to do, but they did fight back really well. And the games against Italy, it was against 13 men for most of the game, and the game against England was obviously against 14 men for a lot of it too. So they're not going to get ahead of themselves by winning a Triple Crown and finishing second. And I think, even if they had won the Six Nations title yesterday, if England had done them a favour, it would have been obviously amazing for Ireland, but it would have been kind of strange as well, because I didn't think that Ireland really shot the lights out. But it's a great place to be in when you're, like I said, you scored the most tries, you can see the fewest, and then you still think you have loads of room for improvement. And I think that would certainly be my sense, and I think that's definitely the sense within the squad, because I suppose we saw what happened after 2018 when Ireland won the Grand Slam, and everyone, including myself, probably lost a run of ourselves. But it's much more measured now. I think France were by far the best team in the Six Nations, utterly deserved their Grand Slam, and they lived up to expectations too. But from an Irish perspective, I'd agree with you, Will. A good tournament without being an amazing tournament, I think.
Shane, would you agree with that assessment where France looked a cut above the rest? And we'll talk about them in more detail, but maybe we can argue they are now the form team and best team in the world, having beaten New Zealand last autumn and having backed it up with a Grand Slam. Ireland a little bit behind them, but still looking reasonably impressive with more room to improve. And then the other teams had such a mixed tournament, particularly England, Scotland and Wales, that you're probably thinking that the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, that's the established order right now, France on top and Ireland a little bit behind them?
Yes, beautifully summed up, I would say, Will. That's exactly, I would agree with you. That's Ireland, I think what Johnny Sexton said in your clip there was probably the best way. He said, we played well in parts. And I think that could sum up the Six Nations for Ireland, genuinely, is that when they were good, they were very, very good. And absolutely, they were terrorising. The stats were shown, as Keane was talking about, the most tries. They really, really put defences under huge pressure when they were building up for those tries. The one against England, Conan's try, would be a brilliant example of that, where they just stretched the defence and they were poking holes all over the place. They have a team now that's able, this game that arrived, you have to say, in the November internationals that we saw for the first time, every single player, 1 to 15, is playing their part in attack. And it's beautiful to see when it comes off. But yeah, were there lapses? Yes, there were against France, in part against England. We even saw yesterday that, they took the foot off the pedal for a while and Scotland got back into the game. But again, as summing up their whole Six Nations, when they were good yesterday, they were excellent. And that's what it needed. And the stats are showing that.
If we can dig into some of the detail, you give me a forwards perspective, Shane, to start on this. The scrum over the last two games, it was a definite issue in England, whether we argue about the officiating or not, but England were able to disrupt that Irish scrum. Yesterday, Dave Kilcoyne wins 2 early penalties in the game, ends up giving away a couple himself. I think there was one given away by Finlay Bealham as well, so it was 3 against and 2 given during the game. What do you think has happened to the scrum? Do we put this down to Andrew Porter's injury, or is there more to it than that?
Well, firstly, you can't discount Andrew Porter's absence, the effect that does have. The quality of the man scrummaging is absolutely immense. Any player who's playing the front row, prop in particular, that knows a guy who can go from tight to loose and vice versa is an absolutely superb scrummaging prop, because that is a very, very hard thing to do. What happened with the Irish scrum is that the Irish scrum is now a target. So teams focus very, very hard on it, because the Irish scrum has been good in the last couple of seasons. It's been one of the strong points. There's been no doubt about it. We've arguably the best tight head in the world with his over general play in Tadhg Furlong. And what happened against England is that England went out and they put a plan together that the whole 8 were wheeling around, pivoting around Tadhg Furlong. It was very, very smart, and the ref didn't see it. Now, the criticism I would have of Ireland was that they should have adjusted. There's a way of combating that, and they didn't. They got caught up in it. They got caught up in the fight of it. Cian Healy was trying to have too much of a tussle where he shouldn't have been. Someone's pivoting around, you pull away, you let them go around. But that's because the Irish scrum, as I said, has become a target. It's become something that teams have to pay attention to, have to focus on. They can't just go on, the scrum is there, we'll be fine, we'll just get on. Because if you don't pay attention to the Irish scrum, they will get on top of you in that phase.
Cian, what was your assessment of the Irish scrum yesterday? An improvement on Twickenham?
Yeah, well, I suppose it wouldn't be hard, Will, really, like when you consider they conceded 6 penalties in Twickenham and a free kick as well. Like, it's interesting to hear what Shane says there. You talk about someone like Cian Healy, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, Shane. Like, you'd imagine for someone so experienced, he probably should have been able to, like, not get into that scrap that you're talking about. And that was a little disappointing, I think, from my point of view. Like, you're talking about a guy, one of the most experienced props that Ireland have ever had, and has never had a problem with his scrummaging. So I was a little bit surprised by that he didn't find a way in the moment to counteract it. I think it's also worth remembering that Dan Sheahan is relatively new on the scene, and this has been his breakthrough Six Nations. We'd seen him kind of playing at the end of the year last year, but he's a very tall man, and Shane would certainly know a lot more about this than I am in terms of like what it takes to be a hooker in the front row. But he's a very tall man, 6'3", I think he is. Like, it's very unusual for a hooker. So I think that would probably take a little bit of time for someone like Tadhg Furlong and Cian Healy and whoever is playing props either side of him now. We know they're still playing together at Leinster, but that's worth considering as well. I think Ronan Keller they're similar players in open play, but Ronan Keller is kind of much sturdier and smaller, whereas Dan Sheahan has more of an athletic profile. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind as well, that Dan Sheahan is still finding his feet at this level as well, and he was outstanding yesterday, I thought. But I agree with Shane. I think the scrum has become a target, and as much as Ireland, kind of they were putting it out there last week that the messaging back from World Rugby after Twickenham was that, a couple of the penalties should have went Ireland's way. But opposition teams are going to be lining that up now. Like you think of like South Africa, or even like let's look at this summer, like going down to New Zealand. New Zealand are certainly going to be eyeing up that Ireland scrum and think that they can have a crack off it. So that is, I think, one of the concerns. Like I think we'll probably get into it. Like there was plenty of positive aspects, but there are a few cracks, I think, appearing that I think Andy Farrell and his coaching staff will be well aware of. And like I said, going to New Zealand this summer, that's the toughest place in the world to go and play. So there's no bigger and better test, I think.
Yeah, we can talk about some of the positives. I think chat about them all in a second. But just to bring you back in, Shane, on that point, should Cian Healy have done better with his discipline then, as Cian has mentioned?
Yes. Not so much in his discipline, how he dealt with it. Because remember, at least 50% of those calls were wrong by the ref. So you can't just point the finger at him for his discipline. What you would see, the problem refs have nowadays is that when they see one side getting on top of another side, they automatically give a penalty. Whereas if you're looking at the rule book, there's no rule being broken. There's no rule about so-called getting pushed back or anything like that. Refs they go trigger happy with the whistle, and it's one of the things that's very annoying. So like you've got to look at it and go, right, what rule has been broken here? Very, very seldom do they get it right, but the fact doesn't change that Cian Healy should have adapted better. When the team are pivoting around your tight head, you either have to scrummage out, as in pull back and show that the tight head is trying to pull away from you, or else you've got to get the hooker to step into their tight head as well and to meet him head on, so that the two of them are pinchering on him to combat that. Because that to me is the problem, is that Ireland, yes, look, Dan Sheahan, as we say, is an absolutely unbelievable talent. He's a fantastic player. And yeah, that would have been a time for him to learn the ropes. There would have been a lot of chance taken by England in that and catching Ireland on the hop. But the simple fact is that there's a way of combating it. It didn't happen on the day. And that's something that Ireland won't forget about. They'll remember that. They'll move on from there.
Shane, would that be an adjustment you almost naturally make within a game? Say you're playing at hooker, your tight head is getting a bit of extra pressure put over on his side. Do you naturally start to just kind of support over that way a little bit during the game, or would you be kind of noticing that in the middle of a scrum in the heat of a battle in the Six Nations game?
No, you notice. You take every scrum, you know exactly what's going on, right the way through it. And when you're going around the pitch, you'll be talking with your props and just having a chat and just making sure, listen, are you all right? Do you want me to step across, or what way can I help? But even when you're noticing during a scrum, there's always something you can do. There's always something you can do to help. Like, as I said, if your loose head is under strife, you can actually attack the tight head as he's coming in. You can scrummage through your opposition hooker if you want to really assist your tight head, just to add extra weight onto that side. It's all about the way you push. The hookers, okay, we don't get much credit, I suppose, for scrummaging, because there's so many other things that need doing, and the props do the bulk of the duty. But there's an awful lot a hooker can help with. And as Cian was suggesting there, Dan, like maybe his height is an issue. He had to do these things. You have to get down very, very low. But looking at his scrummaging technique, I think it's very good. His hip level is very, very low, which lets him maneuver within the scrum. So I can't fault him, per se, but all a learning exercise. You'd be damn sure that something like that won't happen again to that front row.
Just on that way, like I could hear on the ref mic yesterday at one point, Wayne Barnes it was just before pre-engage of the scrum, was pointing out that Dan Sheahan is an extremely tall man. So I think that was something that Scotland were probably wary of too. And just one other quick point that Shane made. The inconsistency about the way scrums are refereed from 1 week to the next, depending on who the referee is, I think is a bit of an issue in terms of, like, if you talk about, like, the sport is is entertainment. So it's great when you have experts like Shane, and I heard Mike Ross was on during the week on Off the Ball, and Alex Sierra was on the Left Wing podcast, and really good when you have experts explaining it. But if you have people in the stand and they don't really know what's going on in the front row, and like from 1 week to next, I think that's a bit of an issue in terms of trying to attract new supporters to the sport.
Yeah, and it ends up with everyone screaming for penalties as well. The minute they see something turning, they assume that the referee is going to have to step in. Something that worked well, Cian,
exactly,
which you mentioned already about some plus points from yesterday. the maul was a very, very effective source of ball for Ireland on the attack, and we saw that in the Dan Sheahan try as well. But not just in that try, the maul worked pretty well all game.
Yeah, and this is one of I would say probably the most pleasing aspect, I think, of the performance. We've seen now that Ireland have a really cohesive attacking system. It's still, I would say, not firing on all cylinders, but you can see them getting into their 1-3-2-2 shape really regularly, and it's great. And there was a few issues again yesterday, a couple of passes going to ground, a couple of silly knock-ons. But what I really liked was Ireland looked at that Scottish pack and they said, yeah, we'll have them. And I think in times gone by, Ireland were probably guilty of kind of having that mentality without having the attacking framework to mix up their game. Because if this Ireland team are going to reach the heights that they're certainly setting for themselves, they have to be able to play both games. Because when you think back to the big defeats that Ireland have had over the last few years, invariably it's come against teams who are bigger and stronger. And Ireland have almost ended up getting in a scrap, kind of like what Shane was talking about there, Cian Healy in the scrum, a scrap that they were unlikely to win because by sheer physics, they're just not as big men. So I like the fact that Ireland now kind of have two game plans almost. And yesterday we saw them trying to mix it up, and you're dead right to highlight it, Will. I thought the maul was really, really effective, but that's not to say that the maul would be, really effective if they were playing France next week or something like that. And I think that is the sort of task for this team, is to find the balance between the two game plans, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Shane, on that point, Brian Driscoll, as your former teammates, made the point in the show a few different times that there are still some of the remnants and the good parts of the Joe Schmidt system where Andy Farrell was there and he was part of that game plan, where they're still very good on ruck speed and very good at getting in at the breakdown. But just slowly but surely, Mike Catt and Andy Farrell have been able to add these little extra dimensions to the Irish attack over the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, and it is great to see. And it was a worry, if you think about it, that the amount of time it was taking. But it just seemed to hit, as I said at the start there, the November internationals. They just came out and everybody just seems to have bought into this style of play. And back with the maul, what Cian was saying is that if you want to be as good as this team obviously are attaining to be, you have to have all the weapons. You have to have every bit of it. And it's great to see them being very, very comfortable and going to the maul. Ironically, Dan Sheahan was almost at fault for the remember the ball that collapsed when they were going for the line there in the game as well. I can't remember who was it that got through, but that's what you need to have. You need to have a team that has absolutely everything in its armory, that doesn't have any weak points. And this team, okay, yes, they will never be the biggest physical side on the planet, but they're willing to take on all teams in the game that they want to play and not be shying away from any particular style of rugby, which is brilliant to see.
Yeah, we've mentioned Dan Sheahan a couple of times already and the impact that he's had and the opportunity that were afforded to him really by Kelleher's injury. Well, this is what Andy Farrell had to say last night about Dan Sheehan's performances once he became first choice thanks to that injury to Kelleher.
Wow, he was amazing. He was amazing, and I mean, obviously we was gutted that we lost Ronan, but obviously there becomes an opportunity there, doesn't there? And Dan's stepped up to the plate, and to go to Paris and then go to Twickenham and learn a few lessons there as well, and right a few wrongs this afternoon stroke evening. Wow, to have so few caps and have all that experience under your belt and perform like he did, the future's bright for him.
Cian, I remember the discussions that were going on when we knew that Rory Best was going through the final chapters of his career, and we were waiting for the World Cup to come around and who was going to emerge and whether Herring was going to be the number 2. Could Sean Cronin get back into a position where he could become first choice? I think Dan Sheahan was playing AIL around about that time, and now here he is as a seasoned international.
Yeah, I'm actually writing about this tomorrow. It's such an interesting story. Like I said, I'm down here at Musgrave Park now, hopefully about to watch the Ireland under-20s win a Grand Slam. But when when Dan Sheahan was coming through, he didn't actually make the under-20 squad initially. By the time the World Cup came around, he ended up getting in because, ironically enough, Ronan Kelleher got injured. He was overlooked for a place in the Leinster Academy because Leinster went for Ronan Kelleher instead, which is fair enough. You have two outstanding hookers. So you're dead right. He went off and he played with Trinity in the AIL. Did an unbelievable job under Tony Smith, who's just done fantastic work with so many Leinster players, a really unheralded guy in sort of the Irish system. But then he went on to Lansdowne and kind of really got a bit of an edge about him. So we see so many guys kind of, you know, coming out of school and playing 20s, and they're kind of household names, your Gary Ringroses, your James Ryans, by the time they get to the international stage. It's been a bit of a slow burner for Dan Sheahan. Like, the guy is still only 23, sorry, but his rise over the last year, I was looking back on it, this weekend last year, he was coming off the bench playing his 10th ever game for Leinster in a home defeat to the Ospreys. So in 12 months, he's now gone to the Stade de France, he's now gone to Twickenham, and he's played a massive part in Ireland winning a Triple Crown. He's featured in all 5 games this year, so it's been a remarkable 12 months for him. And like you said, he's just such a, like, we don't usually produce kind of athletes with his kind of profile, and I think that's what's so exciting about it. I think Shane kind of hit the nail on the head. He'll be so much better, I think, for the experience that he had in Twickenham, because like we talked about Cian Healy, it's about problem solving on the hoof, you know, like it's not waiting for the analysis Monday morning review and the coaches to hold your hand and say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. So I think this experience will have been unbelievable for him throughout the Six Nations, and I thought he just capped it off yesterday. He's such an explosive presence. We saw earlier on in the season his footwork that he had to beat Mac Hansen on the wing. Like, the guy is, I think defenders, when they see him running at him, are like bracing themselves to make a big hit, but they're actually kind of underestimating his footwork, but it's also his acceleration through that footwork. So he can run over you, but he can also run around you, and that makes him a nightmare to defend against. And it'd be interesting to hear what Shane thinks, but from my, like, you know, non-expertise of watching a hooker's throw, like, I just think he's got a fantastic throw. Just a trajectory on the ball, a couple of the ones he hit at the tail yesterday, just a really, really fluid motion. And yeah, I think he's going to be a big player for all the next few years. I think himself and Ronan Kelleher's battle to be the Leinster and Ireland hooker, I think, is one of the most fascinating aspects of Irish rugby, I think, over the next decade.
Shane, they have a very different profile now compared to maybe what hookers would have been like previously. Like, Ronan Kelleher at times can look more like his brother when he gets the ball in loose positions and he gets to use his feet. And again, Dan Sheahan is an excellent athlete as well. They add an awful lot to the team. Like, these guys, even from an attacking point of view, both are incredibly good in the loose as well. Yeah,
what you're saying there, what you're describing, that style of the game now that they have to play, that's almost a given. But these two are exemplary at it. How refreshing is it? I can't remember the last time that we now are no longer talking about the throwing, who's the best thrower, like that. These guys can just do it, and it's just taken as a given. Now, the quality of the line-out that they're thrown into is fantastic. Like, the Irish line-out is executing all the lifts, everything, all the movements, everything is very, very crisp. The support that the lifters are giving the jumpers is absolutely superb, and their timing is brilliant. But it's just like a given. And it's the first time for me for a long time that we're able to just concentrate on how the quality of play that these two players come out with. They're just the dynamism, the aggression in defence, their fitness, their technique, and everything that they do is exactly what you want from a modern hooker, and it's fantastic to see.
Cian, moving away from the forwards then towards the backs. Again, I thought Jamison Gibson Park did a really good job yesterday. He gets in there, he recycles the ball quickly. Ronan Lagarde was talking to us a few weeks ago about how crucial it is at La Rochelle they look at ruck speed as one of those kind of actual important stats. Jamison Gibson Park keeps this Irish team ticking, and at this stage it looks like he's the nailed-on number one at this point. And we saw what Conor Murray can do from the bench when he came on, but Gibson Park has really emerged now as Ireland's number 9 in this tournament, hasn't he?
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.